The guy thought about why he was called outstanding. In fact, he does not deserve the nickname Second Coming, especially now that he is experiencing the worst period in his life. Shouts were heard. People demanded to tear the guy into pieces. Everyone considered it a great shame. He was waiting for exile, the shame of the warrior, the exile, the undoubted exile. All this raged around, but the young man himself was convinced that he would always be seen with this guy as a true blessing. Meanwhile, two soldiers converged in a fierce battle in the arena. A small group of spectators stood next to them, watching their every movement. One of the guys who was hit fell to the ground and curled up with pain. The girl approached the boy and raised his sword directly to his nose. She said with a smile that the score is now 1-0, and it's just incredible. This girl, who so easily defeated her opponent, was Princess Fiona. She confidently moved away from the boy and hid her sword. Everyone was fond of her skill. The victory was given without excessive effort. Princess Fiona again won, and it seems that someone who can overcome it is unlikely to be found before the release. She is really a daughter of Jay, one of the 7 heroes. The girl looked carefully at her opponent and said that he would still have to hone his skills for a long time. The young man who was won by the princess of the background was called Urs. Gathering the remnants of strength, he slowly got up from his knees, overcoming pain and fatigue. Princess Fiona drew the attention of Urs that he grew significantly since their last duel in possession of magic and saber, but she said he has not finally mastered the mystery of the magic sword. The birds answered her that she had completely overcome it. Fiona reminded the boy that this academy was all equal, and added that they have been friends since childhood. She said it was inconvenient to turn to her for the title. Was only curled up in response. Fiona added that even after graduating from training, he never was able to win her. After release from the academy, he has to become a knight and defend the royal palace. But even if Princess Fiona can defeat him, how is he going to protect people in the event of a danger? Harris did not like that this girl would be teasing him constantly. Princess Fiona is an imperial princess. After joining the academy, she was not equal in both martial arts and theoretical classes. Eros has never been able to get ahead of her and take the first place in duels. Fiona noticed that the URC was plunged into her thoughts, and then asked him, why did he even listen to her? The girl did not stop grunting on the boy and blame him for defeat. It annoyed the ER. He turned away from her not to see her reproach face, but the princess spoke again. She emphasized that, in addition, she also spends her time on teaching, although she has important princess responsibilities. At that moment, the ERZ heard 2 girls nearby. They said that nevertheless, ERZ remains strong, and it would be interesting to get acquainted with him closer. In their opinion, it just looks incredibly cool. Princess Fiona also listened to the conversations of these girls who were passionate about discussing her. They say, he had some of the best grades, and also rich, although they did not even talk about it. But Princess Fiona could not hold back her emotions and rushed to the girls. She was nearby with one jerk and began to find out the relationship with them. Fiona grabbed one of them by her shoulders and said not to touch him. Like, let him be talented and successful, but in fact he is still the botan, and even with the oddities. The girl's eyes shone with a frantic spark when she told that this library was hiding in her room's many spicy books. His face was surprisingly sweet, and yet attractive, though he has an interesting look. She could not understand what he was so attracted to others, but she wanted them to learn one thing. It would not lead to anything good, so it is better to stay away from him. The girls listened carefully to Princess Fiona and calmed down a little. They answered her that they understand her position, and none of them perceived Urs as a boy. After that, the girls began to whisper and giggling with each other, and Princess Fiona exhaled with relief. However, Urs heard all their conversations, and it became even worse for him. He was just angry. The guy grabbed his head, thinking about how this princess was spoiled once after. He was terribly offended, and Urz thought that every time he had a good mood, this villain specifically substitutes him. Urs could not understand. Does she really hate him so? But the guy still gathered with the spirit, took a deep breath, and decided that nothing wrong had happened. After all, his heart has long belonged to another. The girl who was quietly talking to her girlfriend admitted that she was ashamed to talk about it with Princess Fiona. Her girlfriend agreed with her, but suddenly Fiona turned to the boy and turned to him. She asked the era if his father would not disappoint in such a situation as it is now. It was really difficult for the boy. He thought that he did not like these wise words, or even trembled from anger. Meanwhile, a break came in the castle and all the students went to the corridor. They discussed lively how the test had gone and who wrote. One of the guys shared with the other that with such grades may not finish training. Others also spoke in whispers with each other. Someone said that after tomorrow he probably will have a sore body, and yet he lost all his legs. At this point, the guards were on duty in the corridor, supporting the order at school. One of them spoke. Yes, this is true. The modern generation is lagging behind. They lack something. He was answered by the partner, reminding that the war was already behind. There was peacetime. The first guard only sighed heavily and agreed. Yes, all this is very sad. Suddenly the guards heard someone shouting. He was fascinated by anger. He called for the help of his magic thunder. It happened just in the arena where he came together with Princess Fiona. From the wall, he looked out of the guard and saw that the son of Lord Hero himself was standing in front of him. He trains even during a break, but it seems that he still loses Fiona. Whatever the incredible heredity of Lady Fiona, her peers are not inferior to her. During the war, Lord Hero won the most victories and received the hero's honorary title for his merits. If you think because almost all talented people were defeated, is it not strange? Once upon a time, 7 brave heroes appeared in the Manga, who saved the city from the formidable king of demons. Ursa's father was one of this legendary 7. However, as the son of a hero, he was constantly under the close look of the environment that sought to see his abilities. Whether in fencing or in the classroom, it always remained only second. People paid attention to this, and their estimates were quite strict. The guard told what he heard. Children of other heroes have extraordinary abilities. The other replied that those children were simply gifted, but then decided not to continue this conversation. Suddenly, the URC came to the guards who were apologizing. He looked very exhausted and upset. The guards were immediately killed and strained because they understood. The UCC heard their conversation. They slowly returned to the young man, and the guy told them that it was he who showed them the Imperial Knights. A pathetic sight. He always wondered whether they should work now. The knight replied that in this situation he would not help. If the opponent is Her Majesty the Princess, but sitting, folding hands, is definitely not worth it. Our hero was extremely awkward to listen to these lectures. The guard told the boy that his father won the King of Demon at the age of 18, but the guy just sighed. He will join the Imperial Knights after the release. Strict workouts will be awaited on close supervision. At the same moment, a man approached them and confirmed the words of the boys. Everything was exactly the way they said. He then added that when he gets into his knight adventures, he asked them to oversee his reckless son. It was Lord Hero. He rose, stood in a fighting posture, and radiated unwavering confidence. But immediately twisted as soon as he saw his father. The guards, on the contrary, were very excited. Just saw Mr. Hero. Suddenly, the man thought, he is constantly busy at work. Why is it still here? Lord the Hero turned to his son and asked what he gave way to little Fiona. The ear turned away from his father and asked him to be silent. This conversation was very unpleasant for him. Lord the Hero tried to enjoy his son, saying that at one time he and Jay found himself in the same situation. He lost his Fiona's father again and again, but his rival, a girl, isn't it? It was evident that the boy was clearly not like this conversation. The hero said the war was really over. The big battle is now almost impossible. When he was still a student of the academy, he was immediately sent to the front. They fought with his mother in the eastern village. Eris immediately thought that he was happening to him as before. He continues to boast of his feats, and Lord the Hero, even in the difficult times, does not stop talking about his beloved. The heir believed. If his father saw how he was learning to own a sword, he would be sure. This time he would be able to defeat the princess. Lord the Hero admitted that he was his fault, and said he could not because of his work. Lord advised him to simply follow all the instructions of the instructor. He briefly said, "Do not complicate your life. Obey it and do it as he will say." ERD believed that his father did nothing special for him. He was taught only ordinary things like everyone else. He studied and trained persistently without sparing strength. Everyone around him had high hopes. In those days, everything he learned was to meet the dangers and fight with monsters. The young man clasped his fist from rage. Lord the Hero turned to Urs, saying that he belongs to people who grow up gradually. Therefore, he advised him to have patience and stand a little. But Urs decided to ask his father again what he meant when he said, "the type that grows slowly." The father was always busy with work and almost did not pay attention to him. Over time, it began to strain the Lord the Hero a little, and he began to listen more closely to his son. Urs asked his father if he was not missing out of training, because he worked so hard every day. The young man looked angry at his father with crazy eyes and burned. "Why is the second place so bad? Isn't it the first? It's a tragedy." Urs realized that his father was trying to comfort him, because he sees. It is difficult for his son, and he was experiencing for him. The father tried hard to help, and Urs thought it would be good if he praised him at least once. Lord the hero was confused when he heard it, and could not find what to answer his son. Without waiting for his father's answer to his accusations, became angry even more and annoyed with his tongue. The guy turned away from the hero and began to depart, murmuring his father, as he was bored. He said he did not need any pity. The hero only sighed hard looking after his son. Returning home, Urs did not restrain his emotions. He shouted and sobbed about himself, looking stupid. The conversation with his father left him a heavy feeling inside. The heir opened the gates that were quietly rushing and saying that he was already at home. The guy glanced from behind the wall and noticed a girl there. It was there that she looked after the flowers, watered them with tenderness. Hearing that the guy returned home, she looked back to him. The girl greeted him with the words, "I congratulate at home." But Urs was confused to see how she looks. His heart scored more often and stronger. The girl smiled with the boy and said that the classes were still going on, so he better turn around and turn back. Then she jokingly called him a little innocent. Barris did not like it at all. She decided that she was treated with a mockery. This girl was named Swace, and she worked as a personal maid in their family. Even before his birth, her parents died in the war. She remained an orphan, and then her mother Urza decided to take the girl to her home. She was rather an older sister than a maid. The guy looked at this girl and noted herself what she was good. Lush breasts, attractive appearance, and at the same time, a rather relaxed look. Despite her bizarre character, he still would like to see her with his wife. Eris replied to the girl that he had tired of studying at the academy, so he just left the lessons earlier. She looked at him and said that, as always, his emotional stability resembles a snail, as slow and unstable. And then Sidi asked the boy if he lost Princess Fiona again. Urs unexpectedly remembered that unpleasant duel and sighed hard. From the point of view of the boy, Sadis realized the answer to her question and said that she thought everything was going as it thought, nothing unusual. But Urs immediately denied, "No, that's not quite true." The young man with a smile told the girl that his success is so high that he can miss any activity, but would still become an imperial knight. The young man asked Sautis, did his father dreamed of it? Everything that happens around him to become a knight. And it was at this moment that Sidus realized why he was so worried. The girl asked him to meet with the master, isn't he? Zeepers thanked the girl for her attempt to cheer him up. He confessed that every time he heard the same thing about the son of the hero, all without his consent, constantly compare him to someone else, and it is very upsetting. The sadist turned to the young man and said that in fact he was put on too many different hopes, up to the absurd. The hero is the one who defeated the king of demons. Everyone knows that on the way to this victory, he has overcome a lot of trials while studying at the academy. Unlike Arzi, he has just a great thing in the academy. The results are striking. Therefore, everyone cannot take a look, watching how it shines and grows. His hopes are similar to light dreams, and this only proves how dear he is to each of us. The words of Satis were greatly surprised by Urza. The young man thought that usually when some Lichek with a sharp tongue shows care, it is some trick. But she always supports him when he is sad. That's how he fell in love with Sadis. The girl turned away from her, quickly corrected the blouse, and turned to the boy with a smile. If he made an effort, a special reward awaits him. And the guy himself caused me a real cold on my back. Seda told the boy that he would prepare for him an omelet of his childhood, the same beloved that he could only dream of. She began to approach the girl slowly, step by step approaching the boy. It drove her out of her mind. She was completely lost. The guy who had barely held himself in his hands could not stand and asked the girl to remain silent. Urs jumped sharply from Sadis and exclaimed to keep her silent. He was so angry that he could not capture himself, and his cheeks had a bright blush. Sadist answered the boy that she was not sure whether he was able to cheer him up. However, it is now time for the annual cleaning of the sealed room. The guy immediately went to the house and went quietly to the right room. The sadist turned to him and asked if he wanted to look. The guy agreed, and then the sadist said she would follow the cleaning supplies. Urs put the bucket on the floor, and the girl stretched out his hand and smiled, allowing you to go and have fun with the legendary sword. Sadis laughed at the boy quietly and wished him good luck in the abduction, although in fact she did not believe that he was able to do it. In response, the guy joked, they say, he was not even going to decide. Urs smiled and slowly headed a long corridor to the big doors. He approached her and noticed that many locks and chains hung on the door. Even before the birth of Urso, these lands covered the Great War. On the one hand, a race of demons led by his lord was a demonic king, and on the other stood the forces of humanity, who led the Lord the Hero along with 7 legendary heroes. Humanity won in this war, and eventually my father, a sword, managed to overcome the king of demons himself. Behind this door is a sealed pedestal on which this sword was laid. When Urs was still a child, His heart was crazy every time he saw him. But now Urs has grown up and everything has changed. The guy finally dared to take the first step and reached to open the door. When all the castles finally succumbed, he dissolved another heavy door with force. But at that moment, Urza suddenly stunned something. In front of him in this hall flew a guy with horns. He heard a quiet rustle in the room and voiced it. Noted that the door opened. The demon turned to the door and noted that it had passed all year since they opened. Orange, frozen in full shock. He did not understand who was standing before him and what was happening here in general. He was not quite a man in front of him, and it was even difficult to say whether a man or a woman. However, it suddenly came to him. It was a completely different creature. The demon said the door had already opened 15 times. This means that 15 years have passed. Noted that the creatures had horns and immediately thought it could be a demon. The demon looked closely at Erza, who had just come, and noted that this time it was not a maid as always. He looked at the boy closely and said that in his opinion, he was in front of him. He would recognize this gum expression among a million others. The guy could no longer stay. He asked the demon who he was and how he got into this mess. Erse was tormented by the question, is he really a thief? But if not, why is it called a demon? And the demon, in the meantime, was very confused and asked the boy in surprise why he came to see him at all. It was angered by Erza, and he was already going to cut off the demon. But suddenly behind him, the door squeaked. It was Side who turned to her and noticed that he was noisy. Probably trying to get the sword, isn't it? The young man shouted loudly, "Sutis," pointing his finger to the other way. There was a strange man there, but the sadist carefully examined the whole room and saw no one there. She did not understand what Eris was talking about. It was very surprised by the guy, and he couldn't believe that only he saw a demon in this room. Saidi retreated sideways and joked that the guy was already suffering from hallucinations because of his protracted virtue. At his age, this happens. The girl removed him and asked if it was, not a joke. The saddle took an empty bucket, grunting that it was quite bad. Now she would have to go to collect water. At that time, Urz was afraid to stay alone in a room with demons. The demon turned to Eris and noted that it seems that only he was able to see him in this form. It seemed very strange to him. After these words, the guy covered even more fear, and Er decided to act. He grabbed the mop and boldly moved towards the demon. The guy tried to defend himself, sending his magical forces directly to the mop. The demon smiled lightly and explained that it was actually a magical sword technique. But in fact, he just comforted and raged. The demon smiled and said Eros that his power was nothing compared to the charming sword of the hero. It was angry, and he immediately rushed at the demon with the attack. He sharply ordered the demon to silence and not to contact him more. But for the demon, this attack was quite frivolous. He calmly told Urz that all his efforts were in vain. The young man just walked through the body of the demon without causing him any harm. The demon told Urz that his body is like a ghost, and all his efforts were only wasteland. Our hero was very surprised by such an answer and asked him about a transparent body. The guy did not understand what the demon meant, but the monster only answered that he had not talked to anyone for a long time. So it's time for him to introduce himself. The demon with a dangerous smile informed the boy that his name was a truck. This is the name of the great king of demons that his father once won. Could not believe his ears. The great demon Treviar, his name knows everyone in this world. He was once won by a detachment in which his father ERC participated, and was written about this battle in numerous books. It would seem that there is no chance to meet the trap in ERC. In the end, EMF could not stand the tension and faint. Seeing this, the garden tried to call him, but it could no longer help. After a while, suddenly opened his eyes, and it seemed as if everything that had happened was just a horrible dream. Erskine stood out of bed a little, and noticed that Sudis was sitting next to him, very excited by his condition. She hugged Erza firmly and said how much it was rejoiced in his return. But the guy was completely confused. Tried to break free from the girl's arms, but she was not going to let him go. Ursa looked at the room and asked Sadil with interest if he was his home. He could not understand where he was. Sadil looked at him in surprise and wondered. Don't you remember it? Seed told that when she returned with water, she saw it lying on the floor in front of the pedestal. But it seems all right with him. Eris replied that yes, it was only a slight dizziness. But it was at that moment that Urz raised his head and saw the demon trainer hanging just above him. The guy immediately rapped off from fright in the whole voice. The sadist also lifted his head to see what is there. But she repeatedly repeated the boy that, as she said before, there was nothing here. However, the demon was sitting just next to the girl and smiling at the guy cunningly. The girl with irony said Erza that she was not going to play him, and in general let himself tell a little naughty boy that the demonic king is here. The girl came to the door and wished to have a good time with a smile until she was in dinner. The guy wanted to stop her, but she loudly slammed the door and disappeared in the kitchen. The demon contained to Erza, reminding him what he had already said. Erz remained tense, because he never understood why he was only able to see this demon. Trinar told Erz that only he could see him and hear it. Then Urz asked the demon whether he was in front of him a great demon drill. And the demon replied, "Yes, everything is true." Erz looked at Trinar's demonic face and thought what he was smug, or could not put up with what had happened, and the annoyance in it grew. Tightly turning to the demon, he said that, for example, he would believe him, that he is really the same trainer. But the guy did not leave the question. How did this stranger find himself in their arsenal? Franar replied that one day he was defeated by the great hero, and from that moment his soul was locked inside the sword. But the hero never learned of this secret of the sword, so he kept him all these 15 years, leaving no room. For some reason, only he can see him, and it seems that he now has to thank him. The birds believed that he was actually haunted by the ghosts of the king of demons. Trainer also noted that this is a rather impolite assumption. Unfortunately, his ghostly body could not touch this world, and at least as he did not try, he could not separate from him. Trainer confessed that he was already tired of this result, so he appealed to Eris to take him to the outside world. However, the guy firmly replied that he would not do so. He is the king of demon. In any case, he cannot leave this place. Trainart laughed quietly when he heard these words, and again asked the boy if he really was telling the truth, adding that he may have misunderstood him. The demon was ominously that he was a powerful and omnipotent owner of the demons, and everyone should submit to his power and worship him. Guire asked in confusion what he was talking about. After all, she said, the demon has recently said that he was not able to interact with this world. Uars noticed that Trainar had begun to look at him. He calmly turned to the demon and said that it was not necessary to do so because in all wine only on him. Prinar was still offended by that guy, and replied that tonight he would still not be able to get out. Decided to ask him whether he could stop making such a dissatisfied face. Trinar decided to act more decisively, and turned to the boy. Urz shouted that it was very close. His body is intangible, so he cannot push it away from himself. Suddenly, Urz replied to the coach that it was good that he understood everything, and decided to bring him out. It was terribly rejoiced in the demon. The guy began to go outside, realizing that it would be only a short walk in the city. Urs went out into the corridor just when Sadis came to the room. The girl noticed a boy who left the room and immediately asked where he was going. Erse explained to her that he just wanted to go to the city for a short time. The girl thought about his words and asked once again whether he really was going to take a walk. Sadis could not put up with such a response, so she immediately threw several cutlery from the boy, flying in knives and forks. They all shook the wall next to it, pressing it to it. Sadis asked formally if he really wanted to die. The girl liked the boy's determination, and she did not intend to let him go anywhere. Trinar watched the girl closely and was sincerely wondered. She was able to neutralize him without even causing any scratches. He was inadvertent to find out if this girl was only a regular maid. The saddle turned to Erza and confessed that today she planned to indulge him. After defeating Princess Fiona and quarrel with his father, he looked very upset. To cheer him up, she led him to his father's sword, who as a child was a real treasure for him. The saddle added that the guy even fainted, so she decided to treat him in his private bathroom. It was at this point that the guy realized that he had real problems. He began to shout to Side and ask her to regret him because he was very bad, but the girl replied that, in her opinion, he is already quite healthy once gathers to the city, and for missing lessons after lunch he will have to get a punishment. And at that moment the voltage between the train R and URZ increased to the limit. The sap appealed to Say to change it. Meanwhile, morning. The boys left school, and Ursity barely kept on his feet after yesterday's sleepless night. Sidi finally released him, but a new problem came about. He looked at Trainar. The demon stuck on the lantern and inquisitively asked Urza that it was a wonder. Urzi explained to him that it was a lantern. He shines with the help of magic at night, chasing darkness. Then the coach got into the car and wondered what it was. Replied that it was a steam engine that transports people with water and magic. The train exclaimed that it was really incredible. People are really very different from demons. Urs replied that he was behaving like a baby. The Eros addressed the demon and asked him the thought of the city, relying on everything he had already seen. Trainer thought for a moment, and then replied that he was just interested in my opinion. But to be honest, humanity has already achieved considerable development and has a lot. However, people forgot about the crises of the past. Once upon a time, horrible paintings met everywhere, and there was a condition of those people who were lying on the earth. Even the enemy is disgusting to look at such a spectacle. The coach said that if he was alive, he would have destroyed everything there. At that moment, ERZ felt as he was covered by fear not only for himself, but for all humanity. Trainer calmly added that, despite all his feelings, it no longer has any significance. The world we live in now has emerged after its defeat. He is faced with a city that has grown due to human ingenuity and ingenuity. Here it is, true reality. Trainer realized that he lost, and now he could not change anything. However, he decided, if the opportunity appeared, then tomorrow will destroy everything. Urs froze in confusion and thought that the coach seemed to him a munning. In the book he read, the demonic king was a cruel and bloodthirsty tyrant, but the man who stood in front of him was much more complicated. He carefully inspected the city around. He just watched everything, realizing that he could not help. If you look at the back, it seems quite lonely. But was a newcomer, and he lacked the courage to say it. And then the mentor said that he had only one regret. He remembered the moment when the hero stood face to face and exclaimed that the mentor was an end. The hero exclaimed loudly, "This sword gathered the power of all people of the world." Lifting his sword over his head, he stood in a battle stand, preparing to attack the Lord of Demons. At that moment, Trainer was sitting near the hero, tired and confused, not believing his eyes. He could not hurt that the hero would decide on such just before everyone. The dazzling radiance escaped from the sword of the hero. Trainer tried to shout to stop him because he knew it would be deadly to him. However, at that moment a powerful explosion came, and the hero was able to finally destroy the trainer. Meanwhile, Trainer noted with a sly smile that those 7 heroes absorbed the power of all people just to defeat him. He closed his face with his hands and shouted loudly until the walls shuddered. Urs thought, "Is that all?" Uarzed asked Trainer what happened to one of them during the battle. Trainer, in response, asked the guy asking why they all attacked him at the same time. But Urz decided to clarify something more. Did he not have his own army? He still remained allies. However, Trainer turned away from the boy and ordered him not to ask any questions. At that moment, Urza was worried about what Trainer said. He seemed to be inadvertently touched by a painful topic. But Trainer has already distracted and turned his gaze on the showcase. She saw a demon impression on the demon, and he, glowing with pleasure, told the guy that he was just a fate. He then asked ERC if they would be viewed in the evening. He did not even know that the movie has a continuation. Urz replied that she was well aware of this franchise. She is quite known. And it was at this moment that Trainer went to Urz with a vigorous look and grabbed him by his shoulders. He asked the guy to buy it for him. Urz asked a demon as a surprise why he did it all. The coach smiled and replied that he was his supporter from birth. He looked to the boy just in his eyes with a tremendous expression and said, if he did not bring him this book immediately, he would whisper something in his ear. EMF told him that he was the embodiment of evil, and that man turned sharply and moved towards the store. EMF called the demon that caught him. It was necessary to hurry, otherwise he would be late. The trainer assured that all this is really worth the effort. Heard from the trainer that he could listen to her inner voice, so there is no need to shout so loudly. A little time passed, and URZ from Trinar finally reached the academy. The bell rang, and all the students hurried to the class. Trainer sat next to Urz and his gaze looking for something at the last desks. The demon turned to the guy and asked who the girl was. Eris replied that they were a real princess. Trainer thought that he was before him Her Majesty Princess Fiona, the daughter of the hero of His Majesty Jay. He told Urs that the hero with a fighting spear has a daughter. For her in this group, everything is clear and easy. She is probably very smart. Trainer looked closely at the girl and noticed that an unusual glow was pouring around her, and every movement of her pen was flawlessly accurate. The demon suggested that it may be as strong in the martial arts. These words struck Erza, and he felt disappointment. Even the great king of demon was fond of princess. Meanwhile, Trainer did not look at the girl's careful look. The coach was already going to contact Urz, but suddenly heard someone call him first. Suddenly, someone knocked the boy sharply on his head. It was the teacher who said that it was necessary to have a great courage to be distracted from his lessons. The teacher asked him why he was looking so carefully at Fiona. URZ was confused and asked in surprise what was talking about. At this time, Princess Fiona blushed, hearing these words. At this point, Fiona tried hard to hide behind the book. She could hardly breathe, constantly thinking that ER was watching her. Panic swept her soul, and she did not understand what to do and how to deal with such a situation. The young man replied to the teacher that it is simply impossible. Then the teacher decided to punish Urza and addressed him with the task. He asked Urza to list the 3 most important magical eyes that exist in this world, and the teacher wanted to name the magical eyes that the Damdamar trainer himself had, and describe their abilities. It was angered by Urza, and he asked the teacher if everyone should list them. The teacher replied that if the guy had not been distracted, he would already know this information. Er rose from the table and thought that the guy did not listen to him. The young man remembered the names, but their abilities left much to be desired. And then he began to list. It was a coat of arms, the Eye of the Moonlight. And of course, this is the eye that the great King Trainor owned. But suddenly Trainor shouted loudly to the boy that he stopped and said nothing, because it was a trap. In fact, he did not have a coat of arms. The real secret was that among all his eyes, the most secret and the most hidden. And then Eric loudly exclaimed the teacher that it was the Eye of 6 Gates. The teacher was impressed with the answer of his student. He looked away from the book and asked the guy what was being talking about. It was at this moment that ERZ realized that he gave the teacher the wrong answer. The teacher began to be angry and suspiciously asked the boy if he was not mocking him. Erard got into the pose of the mentor and asked, "Is he not right?" Then the teacher tried to explain that in fact the story is not his strong side, but he has the Eye of 6 Gates, and it was used during the final battle. And then the teacher told Urz that he would have to stay after the lessons. It was very upset by Urza and his friend Train. Urz mentally turned to the coach, accusing him of everything that was happening because he lied. But the demon just waved and said it was nonsense. In fact, he did not invent anything. This is his teacher from history. He is the son of the hero, so everyone is waiting for him to become the best student. He cannot make any mistakes in his duel. Yours went out of school and immediately confessed to the coach that he could still not believe. He was detained only through a demon. The coach tried to comfort the guy and assured that it was not his fault, but Yours did not agree. He was sure that he was to blame for everything. The demon returned to the guy and asked what kind of competition the teacher was mentioned by the teacher. He spoke of a graduation duel, the most important event of the year at the academy. In this battle, the best fencers go to the horizontal crossbar and demonstrate their skills in front of the king and nobles. In other words, this range is served for intelligence when the organization is involved in combat operations through its ratings. But then Trainor answered this boy that stupid teacher ordered him to be taken seriously. The demon wondered whether he was preparing for something special. In response, the ER replied that no, he was just preparing for shame. Trainor asked the guy whether it really is the Princess Fiona, right? After all, he constantly talks to her. But ERZ never understood what the demon was meant. Trainor reminded him that he could read his thoughts, and he even felt the envy of her almost tangible. He feels that he cannot withstand this girl, and he is indifferent that he is only a pathetic shadow compared to his father. He dreamed of returning to his world, but finally resigned to the idea that it was impossible. He is the same as the genius who got into the well and, understanding his weakness, just gave up without even trying to get out. These words were annoyed by the guy, and he shouted at the coach, demanding not to joke in a similar way. "You don't know anything about me at all!" He quit. Erard was training persistently to own a sword and studied a lot. However, he was increasingly disappointed in his own forces due to constant mistakes and condemnation of others. At the same time, he tried to meet the expectations of people who were nearby. The coach could not hurt what had happened to him. It was completely different before. The demon asked the guy if he was his answer to the objection. As he guessed, his father hero was, to put it mildly, not the wisest. A simple one who was just fortunate to find real miracles on his way. It was in this that he could not surpass his father. He was like everyone else. But these words were genuinely annoyed by the guy, and he clenched his fist so much that his fingers were white. URZ could not stand and exclaimed that he was a real abomination. He lost. This immediately gave rise to tension among coaches. Eris heard cries that he would never be able to surpass his father. We lost to him, and then he began to justify himself, they say. It was not an honest duel one-on-one. He tried to answer him that it was really true. If they were given to fight one-on-one, he would definitely defeat the hero. Urs at this time shouted at the demon, demanding to come up with more excuses. He invents more and more excuses. Only some excuses sound from his mouth. So do not even allow the demon to teach him what a real power is. Trainor could no longer restrain his emotions. He began to grow terribly in size, and the demon shouted in surprise. Does he really give only excuses? How he dare to talk to him so? The demon threateningly shouted at the guy, calling him a scoundrel. URZ has trembling with fear of this spooky creature. Trainor reminded the boy that he was a demonic king himself, and in this situation, he will be proof, a clear testimony to how strong he is, stronger than any hero. Trainor poked the boy with his finger and blamed him with the fact that he was using it for his purposes. He will show him the strength that the demon of the demons possesses. The whole world will again witness its power. The coach explained the boy that the tournament had not yet begun. Therefore, they will start by checking the basic characteristics of this subject. But Uratiktum confidently refused. It angered the coach, and he asked the guy why he did not want it. Urs replied that the reason is that all this was solid suffering. The guy reminded the demon that only 2 months left before the tournament. Therefore, there is no doubt. This time, the princess will surely win. It is simply unrealistic in such a short time. The coach noted that the main problem is only how to get him to take up training. In fact, the guy's, as he is easy to teach at first, but he further fears that he will no longer cope with more complex knowledge. But Ursa was not only engaged in classes at the academy. He trained in his spare time, but also turned to Sadis, who had a night tolerance, with a request to teach him additionally. However, this genius always destroys all his efforts. In the end, it ended in disappointment in the son of the hero. The guy did not understand why this attitude to him. Everyone argued that he was a slack, and that the second generation of heroes was worthless. Urs believed that it was unfair to condemn another's failure without thinking how much a person tried. Gradually, it seemed more and more absurd. Trainer thought and told the man that therefore lacking true motivation. This happens when a person underestimates his or her own strength. The demon wondered what his plans for the future. The guy replied that now he intended to become an imperial knight. The demon wondered whether he made the decision on his own, whether someone else decided for him. After all, if he has not found his goal, where does he get motivated to move on? Or thought that if he became an imperial knight, then all his problems would be solved a little, but in fact he did not seek to become some special warrior. The guy knew well that everyone around was waiting for him to go his father's path, but he was still not sure whether he was really looking for it. Urs was always an independent person, and he had to understand what he really wanted. Trainer told the boy that at first they needed to set a more achievable target. To begin with, their task, in 2 months to provide him with a victory in the tournament. But it upset Urs because everything happened too fast. Trenard advised that he would have to find something that would push him to move forward for the next 2 months. Abstract considerations about peace and justice are good, but they will help little. Instead, not even clean incentives can be much more effective. Subsequently, in our yard, we spread a ladder on the ground for training. The guy never realized what kind of task he was waiting for him in this story. Trainer explained Urs that it was called training on the stairs, but he still did not understand what the question was about. This workout will help him become more durable and agile, and you still have to master the technique of the last step. And here Trenar invented a new name for this movement, magical step. But Urz was only curled. He did not like this name, seemed like a senseless. Hearing this, the Trenar immediately got over and offended. The boy became embarrassed because he forgot that the Trenar could read his thoughts. Trenar decided to first show him his own example. Thought that learning with the King of Demons would once be able to turn the whole world. We trained our student near the stairs and told the guy that he was going to go, and it was at that moment that he jumped out of his place, spreading his hands wide in different directions, and jumped upwards, heading the stairs up. In the end, it laid spectacularly and froze in a stylish pose. However, Urz only looked at him in surprise and did not understand what he conceived. The coach was angry and said that first it was necessary to press your feet firmly to the ground and stand in front of the stairs, and then he needs to jump forward without touching the railing of the stairs. This is called a straight jump. The demon decided to give this exercise a name a little later. Replied that he understood everything. Erze thought that the coach, who was so jumping in his outfit, reminds him of a funny beetle, and it laughed at him a little. However, the demon immediately turned his eyes on the guy who questioned Lee, and immediately apologized to him. Urs realized it was bad. Now he will have to learn not to think about it when he is nearby. The trainer announces the following exercise. This time you need to jump on the sides of the stairs without spreading your feet, a jump in the form of a zigzag. And now Urus imagined that he jumped like a small shrimp, and the coach looked at him again, from which the ants ran through the skin. The coach turned to the boy and offered him a new exercise. Now he needed to jump up, raise his legs together, and then spread them to the sides. Only he needs to do it quickly, as if in the game of Incan Kenpa. Erse immediately imagined this picture. Young children, along with the demon, have fun jumping and exclaiming, Ken Kenpa! The guy shouted to the coach that his turn was now. The demons were happy and looked very pleased. He started jumping and shouting loudly, Ken Kenpa! Trainer looked at a man with an alarming look and asked what he really wanted. That he was killed? Pranar wondered if Urz was really aware of how much workout weighs. Urz answered the demon that he was perfectly understanding and wants to apologize for him. Trainer seriously told him that there was an important point now. Of the 3 techniques he showed earlier, today he will teach only one of them. At the same time, the student should use the same magical element, which will be called Trinar. Urz thought about it. He only had to jump and apply magic. He began to jump, and the Trinar shouted to him so that he did not just jump, but tried to move forward, and immediately use fiery magic. The young man tried to do it, but nothing happened. He understood perfectly. He has been going wrong in generally. The body was not obeyed, it was not moving at all as he would like him. The coach barely restrained the smile, looking at him, and reassured. This climb will help not only improve movements but also quickly develop agility. Thanks to special magical methods, it can now be spent even while driving. Earlier, he was mistakenly focused on where he was going. For example, he cannot write while talking at the same time. It's like music, when one sound is covered by another, louder. In battle, it is easy to manage only the body without attracting the mind. So Erza was given the task of learning to control the body and the mind at the same time. He quickly understood the essence of the test. He mentioned how difficult it was to protect himself from the rapid attacks of Princess Fiona. She acted so quickly that he simply did not have time to answer her blows. Trenar turned to Urs and advised him to return to his workouts. The young man caught fire and agreed with the demons. Trainer told the boy that he would now add, "Yes, sir," as it should. Ur agreed with that, and the demon gave him a new instruction, to try to make a jump in the air. When the guy completed the task, the trainer advised to land the next time on both legs. After long training, Urz suddenly fell to his knees. His legs trembled without cease, and in his eyes everything was confused with dizziness. The coach looked at him strictly and said that if he was tired now, then the victory should not be dreamed. He tests the magical ladder that the demon invented. Ears, as always, thought that the names of him were just horrible. Even after such a load, he feels awful. Didn't he expect training to give a better result? The coach advised the guy to perform these exercises daily for warming up. Only then will they be able to proceed to studying body techniques. Harris did not understand what was being said, so he asked what was meant by body techniques, because they usually only work out fencing. The father of Erza, the famous hero, owned a magical sword. Feeling deep respect for him, Erza also learned to control his magical sword to continue his father's journey. The coach immediately told the guy that they would not be fencing. To be honest, he does not have it all. When the demon saw him for the first time, he immediately realized that this style of battle was not suitable for him. The magic sword of the hero directs all his power for one goal, spending a lot of magical energy. Only truly prominent people are capable of such an attack. Unfortunately, Urg and Durg do not have such abilities. It was terribly angry with the guy. He has been training to own a sword for almost 15 years since childhood. It turns out that all these years of persistent training were in vain. It was very angry with Era. Trainer told the man that he had been watching him closely for several days. He has a strong feature that his father does not have, and it is the ability to be flexible. It resembles a spring sprout that is confident in the sun. So it is likely that he must inherit the power of another 7 heroes, namely, her mother, the Priestess of Mary. The coach explained to the boy that his strength was not in his own sword, but in the skill of working with his own body. It can be taught by developing your own abilities, but the princess is not. In addition, he is able to defeat even a hero. Trenar's words were very surprised by the era, and suddenly Urza laughed loudly. He said all the characters would be surprised. After all, the son of the hero D uses the sword. Trainer asked a man if he liked this idea. Erza replied that he was not. However, in her opinion, it will be great to show them all. The young man felt incredible confidence and asked Trenar to teach him everything he was capable of. But suddenly behind Erza, Sadis appeared unnoticed. He calmly, without any emotion on his face, asked the guy who he was talking to. Urs immediately turned sharply and worriedly stared at the girl. The sadist was asked if he was so lonely that he invented an imaginary friend. That is why his backpack seemed so great. The girl leaned to the fact that lay on the ground, looking carefully and delving into thought. The sadist asked the guy whether he invented this way of training. Urs smiled in response and told the girl that it was not his idea. This technique was told by an imaginary friend. The guy thought, as expected from Swaz, but he could not understand whether she understands the true purpose of such fun workout. Urs asked in Sadis, which brought her to him. The girl stretched out a piece of paper and replied that it was a menu with what he asked. However, only the next month. Urs thanked her and took the letter to her hands. He and the trainer began to look carefully at the written before them. Trenar read the menu and noted that there was a real choice of delicacies. Ursa thought that yes, gardens were really able to cook many delicious dishes, but Trenar explained that he was in mind. It seemed to him that she was understood by the nutrition of each dish and changes the menu so that he received everything he needs. She is probably very concerned about his health. This is visible even what dishes she chooses. The guy looked at the menu once more and remembered that Sadis had lost his whole family during the war with a demonic king. His mother saved the girl when she almost died, and since then they have lived together. Once, when the parents of little Ursa returned home, The boy met them with a joyful smile and immediately asked if they guessed what he had done interesting today. However, the parents apologized to the boy and said they needed to go for dinner. The parents warned that they would come back late, so they allowed the guy to go to bed. But suddenly the front door closed sharply in front of him. He was very upset by the era. She noticed it and asked her, what happened to him? She looked at his work and saw that he received the highest rating. It was evident that he made a lot of effort. The girl sat next to him and said that today they would have a small holiday. She even prepares something delicious. Sadis replaced him his parents, who were almost never home. They were not blood relatives, but her attitude to him was like a real sister, even more than the sister's sister. Trainer noticed Erza's feelings and advised her to tell her everything lying on her heart. Seeing the upset face of the boy, the saddle asked if he really wanted it. But suddenly the hero gathered with the spirit and confidently stated that in 2 months he would win the tournament. These words were very surprised by the girl, but in Zraz he wondered, what can a sadist give him a marriage? But he quickly realized, it is too early to think about it, or maybe offer him to kiss. But this is not suitable. Such things happen only when they begin to meet. Then Urz suggested that the girl start meeting him as soon as possible, and then he asked me to touch her chest. It was very embarrassed by the girl, and even Trainer looked at him with surprise. The boys had an awkward pause. Eris immediately realized that he had made mistakes. The young man began to deny and apologize to the girl. He sincerely explained, all this was an unfortunate mistake. Mistakes are aware that such things should happen gradually, in stages. Sadim is too clean for this. The threatening shadow of the sight hangs over the crowd. The guy immediately began to apologize to her for his words. Erse had already felt uncertain, but still dared to tell him that everything was fine. To put all the dots over and, she directly explained the guy that his request was extremely disgusting. But this scoundrel shamelessly stated that he would win the tournament. For a moment she finally lost. The sadist called the guy Cradton and stated that it would be good if he won the tournament, like then she will be able to touch her breast all day. The girl turned away from Erza, saying goodbye to him. It inspired the guy madly, and he shouted with passion that he was starting to work out. The guy with a frantic spark in his eyes approached the coach and confidently stated that this time the victory would be behind him. The demon objected to him, they say. True motivation should not be pure thoughts, but something dark and seductive. But the guy replied that he was satisfied. The main thing is to win the tournament and get his award. All this time he felt up and delight. But soon everything will change, it will fail, and it will lose Sadis. The coach turned to the guy and said everything was fine. They will simply continue warm up, and then we will teach our former mistakes to fight against him. But for the guy it was a real surprise. The coach told the boy that shadow and sparring exercises were the usual part of physical training. The shadow technique makes it possible to guess and evade the possible attacks of the enemy. During sparring, everything will happen as if in a real battle, only without risk. This time, the rival Urses will become a weightless, invisible ghost. In his training, he decided to call shadows for training fights and called it a ghostly sparring. Hirsch asked the demon if they were really waiting for them. Trainer nodded in response and confirmed, yes, that's exactly how it is. Urz was genuinely happy and replied that he should be interested. By this point, he was only fighting at school. They were friendly clashes. Against him either came the weak or a terrible princess. Due to such a huge difference in the power of benefits, there was little. Urz realized that this was not quite true. To be honest, the rivals happened among them and are really very dangerous. But in a closed environment as a school, it is difficult to objectively evaluate your abilities. Because of this, he could not undergo a full practice. So he decides that the battle with the King of Demons will be at least an interesting adventure. Trainer assured Urz that during the battle to fly it would be a little bit. As always, he would resist the old way. If he wants to use magic, he has no objection. Asked the demon whether he could hit him while in his ghost form. Trainer assured him that with such force he would be able to achieve everything he wants. And then Urz seemed that the coach suddenly raced him. In his imagination, he clearly saw the sword pierced his throat. The man slowly sank on his knees, grabbing his throat. Trainer asked if everything was fine, assuming that he may have wounded his throat. But realized that this could not happen. He only imagined it. Death from a pierced neck existed only in his imagination. The guy trembled with all his strength, though he did not feel pain, but could not get rid of the feeling that death was standing nearby. Trainer asked the guy, is it all that the son of the hero is capable of? Hearing these words, the guy did not joke and shouted at the demon to silence. Without spending time, he rushed forward and tried to hit the Trana, but he cleverly evaded. Trainart noted Erza that he had attacked him as if the uneducated child had rushed. The always noticed this smug smile on his face, but for a long time he was accustomed and did not surprise it. The birds were convinced that if the coach looks at his fist in his fist, it was time for an unexpected blow. Once the air swung on the demon, M raised 2 fingers in front of him. The demon asked the guy asking, why did he stop the offensive? It was a conscious decision, or just the instinct of self-preservation forced him to die on the spot? After all, it was necessary to step another step, and it could end in his death. Urs flew away from the demon and at that moment launched a powerful Mega Grim. Just before the guy, a huge radiant wall grew up. At first, he thought it was good that Trainer did not see him now. The guy stepped straight into the center of the circle, and it was at this moment that the earth trembled from a powerful earthquake. Suddenly, noticed that the guy disappeared. It immediately seemed suspicious to him. It was at this moment that the trap flew just over his head. The demon explained to the boy that he had just decided to act carefully using his friend for the plan. The demon simply struck. Trainer said that after the magic of thunder, they mostly use the magic of the earth. It is easy to use and is easy to control. Yet the trainer admits this magic is quite good. In this case, let it be a useful lesson for him. But first, the URC must make sure how powerful the demonic king is. At that moment, Princess Fiona lay on her bed, suddenly opened her eyes sharply. The girl got up a little and realized that she fell asleep. But it was quite logical if you remember everything that happened today. Princess Fiona dreamed a very warm dream, in which she was a little girl again, and remembered the happy moments of her childhood. She was near the little heroes who lured her into a wonderful dream. Suddenly, at the same moment, the girl heard the knock on the door. The princess allowed the maid to enter. Yes, a little lost, she apologized to the princess who worried her. The maid approached Fiona and reported that she had received a letter for her, after which she gently handed him to her. The girl lifted the find and began to look carefully at all sides. Meanwhile, Urz lay on the ground, breathing hard after a grueling workout. Trainer smiled, looked at him, and noted that in his opinion, it was too much. He offered to train daily, and also add classes on the stairs. Thought with sadness. He could not strike any. In addition, the enemy did not use any special techniques, only simple physical movements that are under the power of every person. The guy was beaten, stabbed, and beaten again. Even when it ended, his minds were constantly emerging in his head, and he seemed to worry again. Once upon a time, he was a little proud of himself. Although the era could not cope with Princess Fiona, he still had the strength to overcome others. He believed that he would be able to stay a little. Deep inside, he was convinced that he felt completely powerless. The coach asked what happened to him. Felt helpless and was desperate. The guy replied that everything was fine with him. He just realized for the first time how weak it was. While Errors was sitting upset because of his failures, he was suddenly thought. That guy told Trainer that once his father, a hero, had already won him in battle. Of course, he was helped by the power of other heroes. But unlike Erza, in a real battle he would die. Without any doubt, he would not survive. The guy was well aware. The ghost had already pseudo-killing him several times, and if it was a reality, it would have been over a long time. Still, Erz dared to ask Trainer how his father was able to defeat the demon. Trainer honestly confessed that he did not know anything about the hero's feat. Then Erz shared that his dad was always busy, and he had never heard such stories from him. When they finally met face to face, the conversation quickly turned into a real lecture. The guy began to tell long stories from his past. Trainer could not stand and asked him if he really listened to all this rudeness. But Urz did not answer him. Then Trainer explained the guy that he was his personal sadness. From the outside, the hero seems to be a true reflective type. However, the path he went to defeat the King of Demon was not easy. He just wanted to know the story of how the hero became a hero. Ersa mentioned how his father was always the cause of the complexes. The characters were often said that their generation was just that. Erz heard these words more than once and felt dislike for them. Trenar explained to the boy. The wisdom of the elders can really be useful, but it all depends on whether you are really ready to listen carefully. ERZ thought what this is called adults. Now he understood why they all passed. Then ERD appealed to the demon and carefully asked him to tell him about his past, if he, of course, did not deny. He really wore to find out. Erz was interested in how humanity managed to overthrow the King of Demons. After a while, ERZ and Trinar finally reached the city. The young man complained to the demon that his legs were very sore. He just smiled at this and replied, "You are a real spoiled rich baby. How weak you are." Yesterday they just fled a little and worked on the stairs. But URZ with a sarcastic smile answered the demon that it was enough for him. Suddenly, Princess Fiona turned to Urza. At first, Era turned to her as a Princess Fiona, but suddenly stopped and corrected, calling her just Fiona. The girl confessed to the boy that she was strange to see him in such a place. The URC replied that it was indeed unusual, but usually he also rides in a carriage. The guy paid attention to the princess and asked in surprise why she was walking alone, unaccompanied. Then his gaze fell on what she holds in her hands. The girl had an empty glass in her hands. Fiona began to be noticeably nervous and, to be distracted, said that the juice in this store is the most delicious of all. This cup is empty because she had just drank everything, not because she was waiting for him all morning. Ayres did not answer that everything was fine. Fiona told the boy that once they met, then you can go to school together. The guy, without thinking, agreed with her. Trainer thought that, if you say straight, Fiona simply made a guy an ambush. Fiona wondered at the guy what he was planning to do after graduation. Yours, with a dissatisfied look, replied that it was nothing that special. Fiona reminded that, as he already knows, the graduation tournament is not a simple friendly fight. Numerous citizens and important persons will be present at this event. Since the girl is a princess, it is here that she will be announced by her future queen. The girl asked if she realized that she was feeling now. Ayres uncertainly confessed to her that he was he. Fiona knew from a little, she would have to become a queen and rule the whole country. Even the child, she did not grow like everyone else. She was raised in a special way. And here the guy finally realized that they were actually different with her, because he was motivated not at all he thought only of Side and her charms. Fiona reminded him that yesterday, when he looked so carefully at her in the lesson, one girl asked her whether it was true. The guy answered her that it is probably true. Fiona answered the boy that she was clear. It turned out that she wins the graduation tournament. And then they will officially announce it. At first it seemed to him that he understood everything. Now he knew. We need to do everything in his power. But if it concerned the old era, he would say the same. The guy apologized to Fiona, and warned that he was now going to win her. Or realized that yesterday's workout helped him to open up his true opportunities. He seeks to show his better side in front of Sadie's and everyone else. He seeks to know the truth about his father's past, and he needs to win. ERDZ explained the girl that he could not just seem like that. Fiona asked the boy once again if it was indeed his confession. Ayres honestly replied that yes, everything was said. True. But there is nothing wrong with that. Still, Ogre thought whether it was necessary to hide from her a deal with Sadis. These words were very upset by the girl, and she replied, showing that she understood everything. In this case, they will come together in an honest and sincere battle. At that moment, the trainer was convinced that their thoughts did not coincide at all. But it seems to him that it will be interesting, so he decides to keep silent. Ayres and Fiona heard that many people gathered right in front of them. The guy realized that he had forgotten something, but decided not to worry about it and try not to mention it. Do not worry that another obstacle will appear on his way. The boys were loudly stating everyone around that they finally returned home. But the earth was not at all this obstacle. Still small, Princess Fiona heard a woman turning to her, as if warning, "Now it's time to focus and be careful." She took these words seriously and tried carefully to write down something in her notepad. But suddenly, someone called the girl on the street. She rushed to the window without any hesitation and jumped out the window. The woman tried to stop her, but the girl was not ready for such developments. She just jumped out of the window right to her friends. The woman became angry, learning that Fiona did so. She strictly told the girl that it is absolutely impossible to do so. Next to the girl were birds, her opponent, and food. The woman explained to the children that the princess should study now, so they should not interfere with her. If the boys do not stop their games, she will tell all their parents. But the man explained to the woman that Fiona was one of the characters, so it is counted as research. And he would not give it to the one who looks like a king of demons. The woman became more angry and asked Erza who he considers the king of demons. She told the boy that he would never become a hero as his father. But Erza assured her that she was wrong. Foe was the best magician in the world. Rival was famous as an unsurpassed sword, and Fiona had a spear better. Bear loudly stated that he would surpass his father and would surely become the strongest hero in the world. Suddenly, Sadis came to the boys and said Urza that if it happened, it was he, as a future hero, would have to defeat an extremely evil Sadis. These words immediately summoned the boys' indignation. It was only a children's fairy tale. Surrounded by friends, Urz was also strong as his father. Then he would not have any doubt. He had no idea that a harsh truth was waiting for him. The merchant asked Eros what happened here. They were also the descendants of 7 heroes, as well as Eros with Fiona. And since childhood, they were friends with Er. The one who is higher in height was a real rival. He is the son of one of the 7 heroes, a great sword master. His possession of the sword reached such a level that even Fiona could not compare it. That is why he was completely convinced of his invincibility among all students of the academy. Once he was dissatisfied with the boys that they are too humble here, so let him leave him alone. The thinner of the guys is Fu. He is the son of one of the 7 heroes, a great magician, and is undoubtedly the best magician at the academy. Fu has always been in goodwill, so he sincerely thanked other guys for the warm words. After that, He smiled and emphasized and reported that he had gifts for all. Fiona told that they wrote letters on how they would return from studying abroad, but in fact came so unexpectedly quickly. I did not immediately realize what Fiona was in mind when talking about studying abroad. Ours replied that they are usually offered to study abroad for children who have taken first and second place in each school, but since the princess refused, those who were in the second and third places went. The coach in response to the boy said that in other words, they just moved him from second place. However, asked the trainer to shut up. Fu noticed that Fiona with Urs stands not far from them. Foucault met Fiona, who was a princess, but the girl turned to him without any ceremonies, because they have been friends since childhood. The guy laughed in response and noted that so much time had passed since. The guy turned to Eris and noted that he did not change. Reva told him that he hopes he may have become a little stronger. Eris said something like this. Fiona told the boys that Eris is the one who never misses classes in training. However, she said, he still cannot overcome his problem. Hearing this, the Bugs was very angry. Fiona wondered the guys whether it was true that they had some difficulties while studying abroad. Fu answered the girl that yes, this is true. Suddenly, their flock of 5 dragons appeared in the sky. Together with the opponent, they were in the detachment for Curb, and they had to go into battle with him. They have everything wonderful, even the medal received for it. All the boys simply could not believe their eyes and were in a real delight. Trainer shared with Urs that the descendants of the 7 heroes were not at all similar, but nevertheless, each of them is very popular. Hearing these words, Urz asked the demon no longer to look at him. One of the guys in the crowd asked Fu to show what he learned abroad. Fu turned to the boy once again, assuring he wanted to see it right now. He is a little ashamed, and the boys answered that they very much want to see it. Fu confessed to them that, in his opinion, he had no other choice, but asked not to wait for something extraordinary. Fu accepted a spectacular pose, and immediately under it the magical circles lit up. Fu directed the tongue of the flame, and at the same moment everything around flashed a bright fire. Urs could not believe his own eyes. Some guys looked out the windows, trying to understand that it was a strange power just appeared. Urs thought in confusion because it looked only as a low-level spell. But then the question arose, what then happens at mega level? All the boys were frozen in place, stunned by what they saw. Fu looked at the boys and asked what he disappointed them, but they shouted together that it was incredible. They were stunned by what they saw. Urz mentally admired this magic, at least pretended. His tone was quite mocking, though it was difficult to see outside. Fu at that moment felt the lightness of Urza just annoying him. The opponent asked the guy with a direct question. What exactly surprised him? But could it be called a surprise? Suddenly, the revolt turned to Urz and asked for permission to turn to him with several words. The young man told that they studied abroad all year and returned from there with incredible skills. In this situation, Eris will never be able to defeat them. After all, during the Fabena show, he was very removed and cold. The guy even asked Urza what she was thinking about him. The guy was just going to answer the opponent, but he suddenly disappeared from the place. Rael landed just behind Ursa's and targeted the guy a huge sword. He asked him that he had satisfied his curiosity. Eris replied to the boy that to demonstrate his skills to people in the academy is only to waste time in vain. Raval addressed Urz and asked if he understood why they graduated and returned home. The opponent did not wait for the answer, and immediately stated that he had returned to take part in the royal tournament and win. After all, they are the children of the heroes in whose hands the future, those who will ever exceed their parents. They are learned in different countries, and he will devote their victory to this person. Burrs was convinced that he had already understood everything. It's not just a fight with Fiona in the tournament. In fact, he has never had the chance to defeat them all, and now he feels more than ever. Suddenly, Fiona stopped the boys, saying that she couldn't let them so easy to do it. She confessed that during their studies abroad they really became stronger. However, she did not sit her hands. The girl apologized to the boy and firmly stated that he would not give this victory. The opponent looked at the girl with an expression of dissatisfaction on her face. The young man turned to Fiona and said that he could not admit her true strength, but he was not going to concede. The opponent dropped one knee in front of the girl and confessed that if he wins, he would ask her to become his wife. It surprised both Fiona and Urz. Eris wondered how strange that he could not trust Fiona and the union of rivals when he became such a person. Other boys were genuinely rejoiced in the new union. Fiona was confused and answered the boy that she perceives him only as a friend. Ruel calmly told her that he has known for a long time. The guy understood well who she was busy with her heart and what feelings she had to do with. He saw it before and still watches her. The rival cast a derogatory look at Urza, and he froze with surprise. So the revolt appealed to Fiona to give him a chance to become a real man in her eyes. At that moment, Urs thought he was really angry. After all, if the son of a swordmaster and a princess join a marriage, No one will say the word across. Urs sincerely wished them happiness. Trainer listened to the end and said Yurtsu that it was very touching. The demon wondered if the Jurdes would agree if the guy still loses, but the answer was determined negative. Urs turned to the demon and asked if he saw it all. The magical power, the sword, which stopped close to his eye. Against such opponents cannot withstand. However, the mentor did not share his anxiety. Yes, this guy would be aware of if he had to fight the fiery dragon or face the highest level magic. Or perhaps he was scared of the idea of guys who had to spend the whole year in another country. Train laughed and said that it was for him, just baby fun. The children of the 7 heroes are sure to be surprised when he heard how he managed to defeat the king of demons in the underworld. For Train, this is just an additional level of magic. But Urs just lifted him, not understanding what he was talking about, and decided that it was an underworld and a king of dragons. He has never heard such words. The coach noted that his classes will bring more benefits in 2 months than 100 years at any foreign school. So he asked the land to believe in it. Trainer asked the excited young man whom he considers his mentor. Suddenly, the guy who stood his rides in front of Fiona turned and shouted. He apologized to them for breaking their joy, but said that he would be the winner. The ERZ could not understand at that moment whether it was right, but decided to take the risk. Shortly before that, Trainer decided to give the guy some tips, because it was the price he had to pay. Eris immediately alerted, not believing, and thought that it was a demonic contract. Trainer told the guy that it is important to dare to declare his goals aloud. Then all the ways to retreat will be closed, and a real need to achieve his own will appear without surrendering. He asked Era to tell everyone about it. The rival rose from his knees and told the Era that he finally understood him. The rival looked at the guy and asked what it means. Then he decided to try the same. Erds confessed to him that he had something he would never give up. He sincerely believed that he could easily overcome this genius. All the boys who gathered in the crowd did not hide joy and began to shout loudly, considering it a real sensation. Erza also resolutely tuned to win. At that moment, Princess Fiona sat down and began to tremble. She was convinced that after such a failure and a misunderstanding of the situation, there would be rumors. The girl barely held back the excitement. It seemed that Erz finally overcame her opponent and could not stop there. Perhaps that is what she herself. But then FU addressed Erison rival and asked who he was supported. They are friends from childhood. All of a sudden began to exclaim and rejoice in everything that happened around. Erz turned to the loud exclamations of people and confessed that he could not get used to it. Meanwhile, the boys went to class. The teacher carefully explained the new material to the children, but Trainer did not like it. He asked ERC whether these lessons were really intended for the future elite of the Empire. The demon noted that it was a very low level, but ERC did not understand what nonsense it was in mind. Trenar sighed heavily and said that he was only telling the truth. Did he ask himself why to write examples on paper and solve them? Erz asked the guy again what he was talking about. Trainer replied that if he has basic knowledge and is able to use them, then it all comes down to substitute numbers and automatically obtain a calculation. But Erz did not understand again what was being said, so he began to ask Trainer what he meant. Trainer reminded the boy that it is better to see with his own eyes once than to hear, so he advised to first study a new spell. In order to understand this, it was necessary to draw a magical symbol, so URS immediately set out to draw something on a piece of paper. The coach noticed it and asked in surprise he was already ready for it. Trenar said Urza that he needed to repeat him now. The demon said the necessary words. Wendo deputy aekron, futo face benri, and then the development was completed. Suddenly, the guy began to appear in his head numerous mathematical formulas. The ORZ realized that it is his own invention, the highest degree of computational magic. The ER immediately grabbed the pen and began to record something in his notebook. The guy looked into the charming ball and saw his piece of paper. There was no limit to surprise. Right before his eyes, the answer was already inscribed in a notebook. URC looked carefully at the trainer and asked in surprise what it was at all. In response, Trenar just laughed and began to laugh at him. This magical ability is suitable for any formulas that the magician refers. If he needs to add, subtract, multiply, or divide, the spell will perform all the calculations. Trainer told Erza that he called him a little girl. The demon told the guy that he invented an automatically tuned thing and immediately began to share the details. But URZ could still not recover from shock. He told the demon that with such a thing it would be easy to pass the final exam. At this point, the teacher announced that they began to solve 56 tasks. The teacher turned to Eris and called him to the board to write his result. At first, the guy was a little confused, but still went out to the board and began to use his new magical spells. He looked carefully at the problem through the magical circle and thought that it was now clear. The guy lifted the chalk and said that the answer he himself came out of his hands. ERC vigorously began to record the solution of the example on the board. Burr waved his hand and decided that there was no problem now that he would not have coped with. The teacher struck how the guy effortlessly solved the task he was given. The ER with confidence turned away from the board, smiling, because he was sure, the example is perfect, so now you can return to your place. But here the teacher returned to the satisfied Ursa and asked where his calculations. Both Urs and Trainer were immediately surprised by this question. They did not expect such a turn of events. The teacher immediately began to ask Erza how he managed to solve a difficult task so quickly and easily, so skillfully that he even suspected the boy in writing off. The teacher began to suspect that the ERZ had looked at the response. However, ERZ was in a hurry to assure, "No, this is not true." A pleased mentor thought that, apparently, such a trick would be unacceptable in the world of this guy. He acknowledged that he was a little unfair to him. In the end, the ER opened her eyes and asked the coach where they were. There was nothing around the guy, just a void. The demon was barely noticeable and calmly replied that they were now in his mind. Fantasy magic. Belief has created a completely new kind of magic. This spell can sleep a person and give a sorcerer able to manage his dreams at his own discretion. You can give her dreams about conquering the world or about amazing women. It all depends on the wish of the sorcerer. In other words, they just have a boring lesson now. But in their imagination, they can train as much as you like. Er thought that the white place was only his sleep, and he also succumbed to his imagination. But Trainer replied that no, he was real. Trainer said he could communicate with him because their souls are interconnected. So when he uses a swirl, he plunges into the same dream as he, and there can create everything he wants. URZ said that they seem to be together in the same dream. The young man decided that this place is great for scraping from the garden. He even imagined it in erotic dreams. Trainer added that faith is sometimes born himself, even when a person is not fully aware that he actually seeks to express. He needs to be careful. When you do this, you can call dreams as many times as you want. The version replied that it was very delayed. The coach said that in one country the hero was so fond of his dreams, trying to escape from reality, that after all the whole country died. In addition, he can do nothing with the body of the spirit. Trainer blushed, and the URC wondered what the spell was. Trainer replied that this was not a spell. It is his own magical force that emitted around him in the form of aura. He just let her go out. And according to him, it is only a small part of all its capabilities. The coach decided to prepare him for the border of the possible one, and suddenly a giant whirlpool appeared near the arrow, which was scared of the guy. Trainer proudly stated that this is his special equipment, a large demonic spiral, a breakthrough of the devil. Was surprised to think that Trainer again invented such a senseless name. Trainer had annoyed it, and he decided to scare that guy. But URZ quickly realized that he was better off staying away now, and so he decided to ask Demon an apology. He sincerely said that the technique of the demonic king is simply incredible. So cool, until the spirit fascinates. With each new word URZ, he became more and more deeply immersed in the magical embodiment of the demon, and the attraction of his thoughts constantly tightened into the maelstrom of events. He was whirling for a while, but because of such power, the guy did not restrain and fell to the ground. Urs covered panic, and he exclaimed that everything was died. Trenar only shrugged and replied that if such a technique is applied to a person, then only the stuffing would be left. The guy lay exhausted when Trenar turned to him. They say, it is not necessary to stay so forever. It is better to sit. And suddenly a chair appeared before the tired Urs. He slipped him to him and sat down at a small table. The demon said that before moving on, they needed to talk about something. Creatures such as demons and people, inside the body, have a kind of vessel in which magic is stored. It is from there that it is released and activated when needed. The trainer drew a figure of a person on the board, marking many points for the exit of magical energy. He explained to the guy that the magic was ripped out of the magic vessel through special flows. It is the number of such streams that determines how strong its magic will be. Trainer decided to show in the example. The more holes in a bag of water, the more water it flows from it. Similarly, when the boy has little magical flows, the spell of the Mega class can only be used to a small part of their true force. However, the coach noticed another thing. Those who have many similar flows of magic very quickly consume their magical energy. However, if you carefully monitor the amount of magic used, it will not be a big problem. A child born in a family of mighty magicians is more likely to become a prominent magician, because since childhood he receives much more magical power. URZ agreed that the coach was right in this. Fu and Fiona really have more magical flows than the guy, and therefore they are stronger than him. and all their strength is just innate talent. Train decides to honestly tell the bishops what actions they are going to take. The demon reported that they would simply increase the number of magical flows. The trainer further drew the scheme on the board, explaining Erte all the details. He explained that the number of magic flows in advance cannot be determined because there are closed flows. If these streams can open, then the magical potential of Erte will increase. Urza did not hide interest, and the guy even jumped out of his chair. Urza addressed the demon, questioning how these abilities can be discovered. The coach, meanwhile, told the boy that he had already strengthened more than one warrior thanks to this method. But the guy did not fit such an explanation, and he again addressed the demon to the question of how he did it all. The trainer explained that he achieved this result with the help of acupuncture. The man stopped in confusion, because he did not get tired of what the trainer had just told him. After a while, the coach, along with Ursa, returned to the room, and the demon showed the boy sharp needles that he laid out on the table. Urz was confused and decided to ask the demon. He really needs to put it in himself. Trainer, without hesitation, confirmed that it was necessary. However, from the very beginning, ERZ did not have faith in such ideas of a demon. They did not like it at all. However, the EMF decided to clarify the demon. Whether he said, would be fine if you insert it into yourself. Was the demon as sure that it would be safe for him? Trainer replied to the man that it was not a problem for them. When Trainer prepared Urz for this procedure, he asked the man to act quickly and carefully. He trained all his weekend to make everything gone as much as possible. And thanks to the sixth senses of Trainer, he can see where the magic streams are blocked. Therefore, it can easily get into these places without any difficulty. And at this time, the ear once again asks the demon whether he was hurt. Trainer explained to him that this pain can be compared to the feeling when the needle is put under the nails. But it did not please the guy at all. He was unpleasant to listen, so Urz exclaimed that he did not want to hear it. The demon advised him to calm down, because today they will have to open only one stream. Urge realized that in this situation there was no other way out for him. Before him was a real monster with incredible magical power. If he wants to defeat such an opponent, he will have to suffer some pain. The heir aimed his needle on his hand and froze for a few moments, focusing on his own feelings. But Trinar, with the help of his sixth sense, realized the needle should be aimed a little right and slightly higher. The young man listened carefully to every word of the demon and did everything he ordered. Finding the right place, he gently introduced the needle into the skin. At the same moment, the boy pierced a sharp, unbearable pain that passed through his whole body. He froze for a moment without realizing what was happening to him. Then he began to shout, and Urz still couldn't understand what a strange feeling he had swept at that moment. It seemed as if many needles had been in his hand at the same time. Suddenly, the guy realized it was a friend's pain, as if he was clamped by chains, and in each part of the body at the same time struck hot knives. Trainer looked at the era who was written in pain and said with a smile that it was not so painful. The demon warned the guy that he did not even think that the reinforcement of magic is something simple. At that moment, the guy could not stand the pain. His eyes rolled, and he slowly began to lose consciousness. The sadist knocked on the door and entered. In the meantime, the girl turned to the boy and asked that she rose for the noise there. Sari saw only Erza, who fell on a chair and now lay on his back. His hands were unnaturally turned back. It passed for a while, and the girl carefully moved the boy to her bed. She took care of him, put on the forehead wet, cool towels, helping him to recover. When Er gradually opened his eyes, he saw that the coach was still in front of him in the air, and noticed that the guy had already woke up. The guy was completely exhausted with the disease and asked the demon what happened to him. Trainer explained that he could not stand the pain and fainted at the moment when this girl found him. Erst turned his head and saw that Sadis, exhausted with fatigue, fell asleep near the chair. Erst wondered how Sadie took care of him all this time. She was worried about his life again. But suddenly the guy lowered his gaze and saw that under the skirt of the girl inadvertently opened more than usual. The young man became confused by what he saw and immediately took his eyes from Swace, thinking that he would not dare to. The guy realized that he could not afford to do so after she was concerned about him. But at the same moment he had doubt. He was only a man. He decided to look in the places where the girl walks daily, but to make it with one eye, as if watching her daily life. As soon as the guy leaned to look under her skirt, Sadie suddenly woke up and asked sharply whether he really wanted to look at the stockings of the maid. The URC lifted his head and saw that Saris was watching him closely. Era immediately blushed and quickly jumped out of bed. The guy asked the girl in surprise whether she was not sleeping all this time. The saddle calmly replied that he should be ashamed to look under a skirt for a girl who carefully cares about him. Suddenly, the girl leaned with one hand on the bed and leaned closer to her. She gently touched his face and reassured, "Everything is fine." The girl was getting closer to the boy's face, not ashamed to show him the most secret places. She smiled cunningly and said that if a young gentleman wanted to look under her skirt, then nothing would hurt them to do it. Sadist did not have time to finish, as a guy ran to their room at the same moment. Opening the door with his foot, behind it was Lord Ahiro, who looked inside. The woman asked Erza excitedly if everything was fine with him. Hertz's mother assured the guy that she would use the magic of healing. But suddenly the woman stopped. She noticed Erz, who was lying on the bed, and said she was near him, very much about someone else. Mom asked her son what they were doing here. The guy was already getting rid of this issue, but the sadist smiled cunningly and looked. And then Sadis rushed Eris and said that he should really be ashamed. It was even more embarrassed by the Eras, because he was convinced that he did not do anything wrong. Lord the hero strongly grabbed Erz and asked directly from his son that he did with Swalza until they were. The guy tried to answer something to his father, but he could not say a word. Mother, having addressed Sadis, said worriedly, "I hope it is not true, a girl, you deserve someone better for yourself." The sadist answered the woman that she would just tease him. At that moment, the coach looked around and with a sarcastic smile noted that they were just a wonderful company. Among the 7 heroes is a hero named Regan, and another of them is a militia warrior called Mom Regan. Trainer noticed that during this time she has not changed at all, as did the hero. Urs thought she was about 30, and suddenly Mammoth seemed that she was hearing the thoughts of Urs. Urs did not have time to blink, as Mammoth sharply gave her a slap on her cheek. The guy grabbed his cheek in surprise and asked his mother why she hit him. In response, his mother said that he had just thought of her something unhappy. Then ERZ asked his parents to ask if they should not be at work now. Mom replied that, learning about his loss of consciousness, she rushed here as quickly as she could. Lord the hero has exhausted and said that if he feels well, they have nothing to worry about. Ersi confessed to the boys who had already had time to hung after all this. The saddle reacted cheerfully to it and said that then she should cook dinner. Mama also overwhelmed the joy of this, and she fully supported Saidi. The woman said it was just a great idea. Mama approached Sadis and assured that she would help her with it. Sadis thanked the woman in response, promising that she would be very grateful for her help. She smiled her mother, and noted that it had passed for many years since they have been preparing together. The door to the room closed sharply, and there was a silence between Urs and the hero, which seemed endlessly long. The father and son could not find the words to start a conversation. At that moment, EMF felt how it became awkward from everything that was happening. He did not imagine how he could look at his parents after all. The train moved in the direction of Urza, and we addressed him. Would he want to ask a hero some question? And here the guy remembered that he wanted to ask the hero for his past for a long time. Urzed returned to his father and asked why he became an Imperial Knight. The hero was a little surprised by such an unexpected issue and decided to find out what prompted his son to be interested in it. Urz just shrugged, they say. He asked just so, for no special reason. The guy said it was time to choose his way. Urz sighed and confessed that, in his opinion, he played well. The hero thought about the boy's words. Wanted to add something else, but the hero stopped him and firmly said that the main thing for him was to protect his family and friends. In fact, his mother and his native village were almost killed under the pressure of the monster. The fields and barn were devastated to the ground, and many neighbors, along with their families, were torn by the brutal creatures just in their eyes, and he was in a serious danger. If that man did not appear then, he was sure he would just have to die there. This man effortlessly defeated a whole crowd of monsters. He turned silently and left, and it looked incredibly cool. That is why he wanted to become a real judge of justice, such as the man. He got up, slightly smiled, and turned to Urds. Isn't it too naive? For him, it was only a childhood dream, a little reckless, as he now understands. The ERZ was convinced that he finally learned the truth about his father's past. At this point, Saad Senam was standing behind the door and watching them, moved by his father's sincere conversation with his son. ERD first thought it was just a naive baby sleep, but later understood the truth and protected this world. Meanwhile, all the boys sat down at the table and started dinner. They were easy to chat with each other, from time to time laughing at the jokes, as if nothing special happened, only she was silent aside. Wondered that he also had his own little dream. The young man turned to his father and said he wanted to talk to him about the graduation tournament. He decided to take part and do his best to win. Suddenly, silence reigned at the table. Mama flew into the air and asked the hero if he heard the words of his son. The hero said again that he wanted to win. In response, Mom promised to do her best to support him. And suddenly URZ heard the same words that his father once put in his morale. So you do not need to apologize for the defeat. They will be happy if he at least try to do it. But was tensed, because his parents always told him that even in the event of defeat, it was impossible to despair. He never realized what they meant. Urs could not understand why everyone was saying as if he were already doomed. After all, he really fought his best, seeking to win. At that moment, the guy decided for himself. From now on, he would not seem and will go to the end. The sadist looked at the boy and immediately realized that something was wrong with him. Urs rose from the table, apologized to everyone, and confessed that he was not feeling well. He sincerely thanked the girls for their delicious food. He left the dining room and left the corridor forward. The coach asked the heir whether everything was fine with him. After all, dinner with his family for him is a real rarity. But suddenly URZ turned to the coach P and began to ask him to teach him to become stronger. He was indifferent to what he did, training or acupuncture. The URC shook his best that he wanted to prove to everyone he was able to win. His intention was not only in words but also in business. Trainer agreed with him, adding that he had heard him. But today and tomorrow they have a weekend, so you can relax. Urs wounded what it means. Trinar warned him that grueling workouts would only worsen the situation. In addition, the load from trying to open magical flows is too large. And the next day, it was on this day he knew for sure something would happen. But URZ never understood what it was about. And here he remembered that the same book soon came out. Trainer said everything is going great. Tomorrow he plans to spend the whole day reading. Urs assured him that they had already taken care of everything and nothing needed to worry. In the meantime, he has another 50 days before the tournament. He remembers this day as one of the worst in his life. She apologized to the baby for not having time to come on time, though it was only a small mistake. Mama turned aside and said she could also hold him. Eris suddenly wept, and the girl took him in her arms. She was very glad that she met this baby. Meanwhile, Trainer and Urs went to the bookstore to watch new books. Trainer did not hold back joy. He no longer hoped that he would ever wait for the continuation of fate. And now this moment has come, and he could boldly plunge into a new story. He stood Urs and Novkov, because he still did not believe that he really purchased this book. It was exactly the novel that Trainer told him the day before. He is already tired of buying new parts that came out after the author's death. Trainer thought that he could not imagine how he had to rent a cart only to pick up all this home. Train turned to Urs and persistently said that they need to read it immediately, where he points his finger on the bench. Urs agreed with him. They came to the bench, and the UCC began to lay out books. The coach was incredibly satisfied at that moment. The demon told the guy that now, when they bought the whole house, he will swallow everything right away and read all the information at a time. He also added in response to the trainer that they had already discussed it before. Did the king's eyes really shine? Because of human culture? And more interesting, the cultures of the very race that killed him. But Trainer noted that the culture does not depend on the race. To discard someone only because of racial differences, only people are characterized, and true development occurs when we take on good ideas from each other. The ER is fully agreed. Trainer asked the boy not to waste time to turn the pages for him, and then turned to Urs to share his impressions. The guy in response sarcastically promised that, of course, he would tell everything he thinks. Urs sat on the bench and behind the trainer. The guy, however, did not flip through the pages, but simply turned to Urs. The demon in surprise asked the guy why he reads so slowly, but he just shrugged and replied that Trainer asked to do it quickly. He was quite confused by the young man. He just started reading. Only 30 seconds passed and already need to hurry? Trainer replied that he had already read this page 5 times. It was very surprised by Urza, and he wondered what happened so quickly. Advised the coach to view this book for himself, because he may not be about to read it. But the coach did not like it, and he decisively refused. He said he could not allow this, because he must first discuss everything with him after reading. He did not understand his ears as to why he was doing so. Trainer told the guy that in this case, he would teach him to read for this purpose. The demon explained to the boy that all he needed was the sharpness of vision. The earth did not understand what he was talking about. But the coach explained the boy that he was not thinking. There is a concept such as dynamic vision and lateral vision. Dynamic visual acuity is the ability to keep a look at moving objects. It depends on the strength of the muscles of the eye, so that the eyes can move faster and better capture what is moving in front of you. From this, it follows that this technique is closely related to the ability to read quickly. Urs replied the demon, what it means, it only needed to read. But it turned out that it is not necessary to master such a highly specialized skill. But Trainer assured that it was not all. Due to dynamic visual acuity, it is easier to track fast movements. In other words, this avoids many attacks. Eros explained the demon that he was useful in battle. Train settled him and confirmed that he was true. Now Trainer noted that peripheral vision is entering the case. So first he needed to pay attention to the couple who stood in front of them. But suddenly Urs threw the phrase so that they would die faster. Trainer was stunned with such words. He could not imagine that he would hear the similar. The young man was sitting and inseparably looked at the couple. But Traynor told him that he was so close enough. He could look now. The demon asked the guy, asking, what color was the bench, how many people stood before them, and more, how many plants grew behind. Eris replied to Traynor that he did not pay attention to it, to which Traynor only nodded and said that he thought. Side vision allows you to notice all the objects around in view, but it is only necessary to focus on something one, and everything else is gradually slipping. During the battle, he focuses not only on his fists and swords. If you look closely at the opponent completely, you can see his preparatory movements before the blow and thus take the initiative. This technique, which he can learn, training his vision in this way, is called gun. And then I realized that even this guy looks fun at first glance. All this is a strong proof that it really works. But he did not rest with one question. Thanks to the grueling training on the stairs, his reflexes and agility were really better. He felt much better learned to control his own body. The young man realized that the methods of Traynor really work. He turned to the demon, saying that everything was fine, and apologized for not taking him seriously before. Nevertheless, he still does not understand how to proceed. Traynor replied to the guy that the goal for today is to read this book to the end. The guy was surprised by such a statement and asked, "What? It's just impossible." Traynor replied that he did not accept any other reply other than consent. At first, they had to train the look. The guy agreed with him. Thought he had to just trust Traynor. Or maybe it would even be better if he didn't. A few years ago, Mama and the garden were walking in the market. Suddenly, the woman looked around nearby. It turned out that she lost her little daughter and now in a hurry to find her. The seller asked the mother to his mother if Sadis fled her again. Mom only sighed and nodded, they say, so. But where did this restless child go? Suddenly, Muma came across a girl. She immediately rushed and shouted, demanding that Sidi would return and obey her. She very much wanted Sidi to stop acting so stubbornly. The saddle did not remember much from her past. She lived in a quiet town with her dad and mother. Her memoirs easily mention children's joy and how happy she was in those days. But what happened in this city? How could this in general happen? She didn't even imagine. Meanwhile, deep underground, in the underground complex of Cicinata, their events unfolded. The demon held ancient scrolls and, ominously, in these papers, the magic stored in the city since ancient times is hidden. It is a forbidden art whose power is so great that it is able to erase whole continents from the face of the earth. Traynor threw papers on the table and muttered that people were too fond of it. He does not even suspect how devastating this spell can be. The man asked the king of the demons to silence, because it was their last hope in the fight against him. But suddenly the man in the mask grabbed him for his hair and firmly stated that he would not give him it. He planned to sell this empire to use them on their army. It seems to be a weapon of mass destruction. There are also records of secret meetings. Traynor only shrugged, they say. He still doesn't need it. Usually he would simply order to use this spell to his warriors, but this time it became clear to him. This magic is too strong. Therefore, he asks forgiveness, but is still forced to destroy this magic, even if it hurts himself. Traynor used a large spiral of dynamics, a spiral of breakthrough and destruction. That's right. An adult sadist stands with a mop in his hand and trembles. She noticed that even after so many years, it is only necessary to get distracted for a moment. As in memory, it floats that day, and the heart immediately shrinks from anxiety. But suddenly the girl felt that she had been engulfed by anxious thoughts. She realized that he should get there as soon as possible. The girl resolutely opened the door and entered the room. Imagine, this creature entered the room where portraits hung on the walls, each of which was depicted small ears. The girl looked at them and thought that he was so cute. Only his appearance can be felt even the most red heart. And now she, Sadis, has become a maid in the Regan family. Her native land was destroyed by the king of demons. When the girl was already on the verge of death, she was rescued by Mammoth. One way or another, she had to find a place in the orphanage. But her mother became her sister and took her to her. The woman told everyone that she would now take care of Sidus herself. Sadie realized that her mother became a real sister, which she loved very much. When she married the hero, she was a little upset about the decision. But he accepted her as a foster daughter, and since then they have all lived happily. And so the same moment came. Mahmoud approached the garden with a young child in her arms and allowed her to hold the baby. These were small lands. The girl looked at him and realized, before her a native, hardy brother, though they were not related to blood. And now she has a new life that came after the death of her family. She dreamed that everything remains so much. The girl opened the box, and at once the flow of memories from the past. She took the ribbon to her hands and remembered that this tape remained from the bouquet he gave her for graduation. The ERZ asked her with a frightened look if she would not leave them after graduation. Sadis was felt by seeing how dear the heiress's face became when she was sad. The girl wants to take a little coming up with him. She understands that this is not quite right, but she so hards to disturb his peace. Most of all, she wants to see his sincere smile again. The girl suddenly had too many memories before her eyes, and her face became serious in an instant. She closed the box with memories and thought, no, it would not go. The sadist finally realized that Princess Fiona actually loves the young master, and everyone around them knows. If everything is fine, the children of the 7 heroes will marry each other, just like her mother married. Crazy just throws them away, like the rest of the people. The saddle was aware that the ERZ was not doing as it is accepted, but despite all she believed, sooner or later he will look at her with those gentle eyes. She would never be able to tell him about it. At this point their fence opened, and reported Sadis that he had returned home. The girl was glad when she found out that the guy was returning home and told him that he had bought many different things. Agreed with that, but the girl noticed that the boy had eyes. The sadist could not understand what was happening to him. Maybe something happened during shopping. Suddenly, the skirt of Saris flew up sharply, and her bare feet became visible. She realized that EMF witnessed what he had to see. Such a corrupted look for another respectable master is simply unacceptable. The guy approximately approached the girl a few fast steps and suddenly bounced. He caught a scarf that flew away, and the girl was very surprised by such an act. He conveyed this Sadis, and she thanked the boy for his help. Erse told the girl that she was reading a book before dinner. She asked to call the guy when she was ready, but Sidi was very surprised. He is a guy and should see her underwear, but behaved like a real gentleman and grabbed her scarf. She realized that she did not even notice how something in her thoughts changed so much. And at that moment, URZ felt true joy, because his ability to notice the smallest details around him became useful to him. The young man shared with the trainer that visual acuity is a truly valuable gift. Trinar assured him that he was not here to look under the girl's skirts. The demon thought that, nevertheless, he managed to master this skill surprisingly. It turns out that he is not as unlucky as everyone thinks. It became a real surprise for him. He mastered everything incredibly quickly. This is how the great demonic evolution looks after breakthrough. Now his chances of victory have increased significantly, and before the start of the tournament there is another 49 days. The night came. Again went out to the yard to work out. The young man looked at his hand and noticed how magic appeared on it. Trenart told the guy that he had now learned to control magic around him confidently. URZ said that all his suffering for the sake of opening magical flows were worth it. He quickly learned to cause magic in the real world. The coach asked Erza what he was thinking about exemplary equipment. Closed his eyes and gladly informed the demon that it was delicious. Everything he sees and hears seems so familiar to him, as if he should be. He is amazed at how acutely he perceives every detail around. Suddenly, URZ turned sharply to the coach and announced that their last, most important final science came. At the same time, Trenar suddenly jumped up and rushed to each other. They came together in the battle. The ghostly sparring began. It seemed that it was a duel with an elusive ghost. Even when it strikes, it does not feel any resistance. But when he came together with a trainer, who has the highest level of magic of visual acuity, and he also learned to increase his vision, it became easy to predict when and where the opponent would strike. In the very swing of the fight, the URZ thought that if it had happened 2 months ago, it would have long been put in the ground, leaving no whole bone. And so the guy suddenly realized that he was no longer scared to watch death in the eye. And then URZ realized that his defense had a weak link. In a moment, he saw the Trinar's fist rapidly flies in his face. In a moment, he felt the demons on him. The guy flew to the ground and whispered to the ground. He was convinced that he would not get it. He will have to witness his own death from their hands again. Lying on the ground, Urz sighed and said that it was all useless. The Trinar in response noted that he really surprised him, and even managed to attack by surprise. But it was still not enough to win him. And then Urz exclaimed that he was indifferent. He wanted to fight again. Trainer laughed in response and noted that he had a great mood for battle. Soon returned home. He went to bed and called on R's train, asking the demon why he sought to destroy humanity. Trinar inflated his lips and said he had been at it again. The demon wondered in the boy what a difference he was. Eris replied, "No, to be honest, it really worries him. He constantly thinks about it." The ears were asked if it was time to tell him about it. In response, Trainer said that he doubted whether people could understand him. It was 1,000 years ago. He no longer remembers why he thought that, and what made him come to such conclusions. Somewhere deep in the caves, where no ray of sun is pierced, there is a real world of chaos. With shaken air and harsh power, it was here that Trainer was born. He had a dream, to escape from the world of demons and see what awaits beyond. He dreamed of seeing the vast oceans, thick forests, feeling the warmth of the sun, getting acquainted with different crops and technologies. He wanted to see all this with his own eyes. However, for him, this dream did not come true in an instant, as if by a magic wand. Racism was aggravated, and many ideas began to be distorted. Millenniums have passed for centuries. His goal has long changed, as well as he was a completely different person than ever. Not having time to recover, he realized that he himself became the worst king of demons. Birds are miraculously listening to the demon in their eyes without believing what heard. The trainer told the man that everything was over. He mentally imagines how the world of demons changed after the event. Urs addressed the demon to the question of whether people behave cruelly to other demons. Trina just sighed back, explaining that this world is a very common thing for this world. During the war, attacks and death raged everywhere. People did dishonest actions, and he also did not stay away. In other words, the cruelty of the kings of the demons has heard the trap before, but now he has convinced this in his own bitter experience. Trinart thought and admitted that he would very much like to visit the world of demons. The trainer surprised it, and he asked the guy what he was talking about. Urs explained that the coach helped him to train all this time, so why didn't he thank for it? He would also like many countries to join training, and with a smile confidently asked the boy because he was absolutely confident in his words. The young man answered the demon that the Knight of the Empire, like his father hero, would live a peaceful and quiet life. Trinar assured the boy that he became an imperial knight. He would no longer have time for such little things. Everything will be fine with him. Urs realized that he would have to follow his father. The guy said Triner would like to explore this world. It sounds exciting. And he also would like to do it, because he does not want to stay in this country until the end of his days. In this boundless world, he dreams of becoming stronger. He wants to be someone who can go anywhere without fear of obstacles. Meanwhile, only one day remains an important day. Here is the long-awaited day of the tournament. Many people have already gathered in the arena, and they all stood on the platform, waiting for the beginning of events. At this point, Urs sat markedly nervously and carefully wrapped his hands with a bandage. Trainer looked at the podium and surprised that much more people gathered than he could imagine. This is the usual match of children. Eros explained that this year the descendants of 7 heroes will participate in the competition this year. The guy said that many influential people came to games every year. Many come there only for the sake of seeing the nobility. The coach noted that these are just the ideal conditions. Suddenly, the man turned to everyone and asked to focus on him. He announced that today the tournament for release from the Imperial Academy began, and thanked everyone who came. And here is the moment when the participants of today's tournament came into the arena one by one. Fu, his rival, Fiona, and Urz. Many people gathered in the podium. Everyone cheered for their favorite. They shouted words of support, trying to encourage their pets. Sadis also shouted to the Erza, who was rooting for him. The man announced that each match would be in the format of the tournament. The opponents will be determined by the draw. Each will take turns to the main and pull the lot. And here the first man announced that the opponent would appear now. All the audience who worried about the guy suddenly stamped so loud that they were heard from everywhere. One of the fans exclamedly exclaimed that his posture was simply striking. For many, it was the best among all students. Some even heard that his forces have no less than that of a real imperial knight. There were exclamations everywhere that the opponent would be the winner. Urs heard these cries and was upset, because even the draw has not yet begun. So he approached the man, and he, without spending time, pulled down Pokeball. It meant that he was beginning to fight. The man loudly declared all those present that Riva Janet would participate in the first round. The fans immediately exploded. It was difficult for them to believe that they would see their favorite rival at the start of the competition. The man announced that the next draw would be held by the EMF Regan. But it was at this moment that silence fell on the stage, and only fragile whispers and muted negotiations violated silence. Everyone around spoke that he was the son of the hero of Regan himself, but he was called a failed heir. Someone answered the boys that he could become a dark horse, and said they would have to live in the sea. The coach asked the Error whether he thought of something wrong. Error looked at the demon interest, asking his eyes, or, all right. The demon only smiled and replied that everything was fine. He even liked it, because everything that happened seemed to be extremely exciting. And so with some insecurity approaches the man and takes the box in which the balls lay. The guy sharply throws him up. At this point, everyone who was in the arena could not believe their eyes. The guy immediately used his special skills and looked at the ball, quickly determined which of the balls had a number. O grabbed one of the falling balls and announced that he had the first room. Other opponents did the same. But suddenly a spooky silence reigned in the arena. Everyone on the stands began to be indignant loudly, not understanding what he allows himself. Does he not know who and where his place? And then Lord the hero grabbed his face and said it was an incredible nonsense. He was just a fool. No one could believe that he was about to destroy this historic tournament. His rival was tense to the limit. Viewers turned to the guy and asked if he realized why he did so. The guy replied that he was aware of this. The opponent was extremely angry. The opponent was convinced that he saw this number, so he chose it himself. The rival shouted the guy that it was great. The heir turned sharply to his rival and said loudly that he was declaring war. The opponent immediately accepted the call. However, no one realized that it was actually a challenge from Erza. What really happens? If Rael did not intervene, a quarrel could erupt between the children of the 7 heroes. But the man stopped the youth, and strictly said that it was impossible to do so. He asked the ladies and gentlemen to calm down. Suddenly, a loud cry came. Someone demanded that everyone fell silent. Silence has fallen on the whole podium. Everyone froze, trying to understand what is happening. It was the soldier of Emperor Ratar. At that moment, the trainer felt his face herself with memories from the past. One of the 7 legendary characters was a charming speaker named Sol. The Emperor stated that the actions of Erza Regan contradict the established rules. However, he turned to his rival and asked if he was taking his call. The guy leaned before the Emperor and confidently stated that he would definitely win in this tournament, whom his opponent would be. Sol just said there was no need to pull the lot. He hopes that he and ER are still equal. And then her mother exclaimed to lie so that he would not do it. The hero also stood to his side and agreed that she was right. After all, their son is truly reckless. But Erza assured his parents that everything was fine with him. He also explained to them that it would be unclear to give up the call that someone younger threw him. Emperor Sol rose to full height and strongly stated that his fighting spirit would only strengthen. It confidently allows you to start action. It will not be just a fight between graduates. This is a real duel between warriors. The Solji announced that the rival, Janet and Erz Regan, will fight in the first round. He officially confirmed this match. At that moment, Ursh remembered how people said, "What else to wait for the hero's son?" And these words kept his heart because he could not tolerate it. Whatever he tried, all his achievements were attributed only to the merit of his father, a great hero. After all, they say, for the son of the hero it is so clear. So the guy felt that all his efforts had no value. One way or another, the guy realized. For others he was not an Erzaragan, but only the son of Lord Hero. And although he did not want to disappoint others, at the same time felt that he could not live up to their hopes. So he is going to meet with his opponent in this tournament. At that moment, the boy's parents were very tense. They did not understand what was happening to their son. The man declared loudly to all present, "Today the graduation tournament of the Imperial Academy is held here. And now it's time to start the first round." He said that he was the son of one of the 7 legendary heroes and is considered the best fensinger of the Imperial Academy. And the dark horse of this tournament was the son of Hero Regan. There was a little confusion during the draw, but the matter was still coming. This battle will be the confrontation between representatives of the 2nd generation of 7 heroes. At that moment, the train turned to the ground and turned to the boy, asking if he wanted to use it. In his thoughts, ERZ answered himself that no, first wanted to check his own strength. The man remembered how he honed his reflexes in training with a ladder and also an imaginary sparring session with trainer. In addition, he passed visual exercises for care with cute images. Now he wants to find out how far he can go using only simple techniques. Trine laughed at him a little and said that it would like to do in his place. Suddenly, Air turned around and looked at Sadis. The girl sat, completely depressed and upset. In his thoughts, he addressed the girl and repeated to her the same words as then. "Let him simply watch. She will soon see that he will be the winner of this tournament." At that moment, the sadist abruptly bounces and exclaims to the Erza. She asks the guy why he doesn't have a sword. At first, the guy did not understand what she was talking about, but then I remembered. Yes, he was really a sword. Fiona asked her in surprise if he really forgot his weapon. How could this happen? One of the observers noted that this boy was so confused that he even forgot his weapon. "Well, the prostate," he added, "and this is the son of Regan's hero. People are interested in the inheritance of 7 heroes, and he is the son of one of them, but does not even take the sword." The hero exclaimed to Urz so that he immediately went to the waiting room and brought his weapon because everything went out of control. But the guy just got into and thought that everyone just voted too much. The man returned to the boy and asked what he would like to bring, but the guy just refused. At first, he said loudly that his sword was his fist. The man answered the boy. "That's how it happens. Hearing that the Regan is going to fight without weapons, it loudly announces the beginning of the first round." At that moment, the Segal realized that he underestimated him. At first, it seemed that it was only in the draw, and now he is still without weapons. It is clearly not just a game for him. And then Riva was angry, in fact, and shouted loudly that he had already bored. He did not hesitate to attack the guy with his sword. Everyone in the podium was vividly cheered for the opponent, filling the hall with loud exclamations. But Fiona did not find a place because of the excitement for him. Finally, she could not stand. She shouted to the boy to keep track of his opponent closer. But suddenly her eyes were widely revealed with surprise. The rival swept by the guy rapidly, and he did not understand what had happened. The rival wondered if the boy managed to evade him, so he shouted, "They say, if so, then keep it." The opponent took the imperial sword and released many blossoming blades. Those who watched this were surprised by his incredible speed. The ordinary person simply did not have time to move. The guards closely followed the duel, and one of them noted that not every imperial knight boasts such skills. On the second night, the man replied that he did not see the sword at all. The guard noted that Revio did not even touch the land. The guy was convinced that he was doing great, because he seemed to have a vision to read almost without mistakes. If you use peripheral vision and ability to follow the movements, you can even predict what the opponent will make further, focusing only on the movements of his eye muscles. Thanks to the reflexes he produced during training with a ladder, the hero is lightning, taking into account the next step of the opponent. All this is the result of Ur's training with trainer. The guy assured that he was not his father's magical sword, but Urza Regan's technique. Then applied the reception, a spiral strike of a large demon. The opponent got a powerful blow straight into the face. The whole arena froze in surprise. No one expected URZ to put such a strong blow. All present were genuinely amazed. Reacted to any receptions with only his fist. The opponent threw a short look at Urza. At the same moment, URZ thought in Maham, Hero and Sadas, as they have it. One of the boys exclaimed that it was an extremely powerful blow, and not surprisingly, because they are faced with the hero of the second generation. Those who were nearby led rumors. They say, the son of the hero Regan has nothing special. However, everyone has seen now, and it has some shaky, and it was not surprised because it is in his blood. However, the guy himself was just impressed, hearing what they were talking about some talent. He asked not to depreciate his persistent training in this word. Someone also said he was convinced that he was training with his father. If this is true, then it is really cool. But everyone was interested in others. In what way he could defeat his opponent. Urz wondered why everyone decided that he was training with his father. The hero is here at all. In fact, his father did nothing. He just left him. People exclaim when these heroes are incredible. The coach asked the guy not to pay attention to these words. He still has a chance to get rid of the label of Regan's hero. URS assured that he understands it all. But he did not have time to think about it. It was at this moment that the real wiped blood out of its face. URZ was convinced that he had a stroke. The rival asked the guy where he came from. He abandoned the magic he knew well, and now uses some strangers that I have never seen before. He was once a regular sword, but suddenly became extremely strong. The rival asked if the hero helped him, because the things EBC, Arab, and Rivak were all the Mahma action. But the URC only scornfully roaring and replied that if it were true, they would not have such expressions of face now. The opponent did not understand him and looked at the guy with surprise. Urdo explained that he had coaching his legs, sparring a lot, and read a lot of books. Riol exploded with anger and stated that it could not be everything. Eris calmly replied to her husband that yes, probably, this is not the whole reason. The young man said that a good-natured person who taught him this style really came to his aid. It seems that after this meeting, his view of the world has changed a little. Hardly crossing the threshold of the academy, he immediately faced an obstacle that seemed impossible to overcome. Among the children of the 7 heroes, he just lacked something. He was reminded of it all his life. He had no such talent for fencing as his rival, did not master magic as skillfully as Fu, and could not boast of artistic abilities that Fiona was famous for. Always said that he had no special talent. He could not live up to others, and it became his own curse. But then that man told the guy that he lacked a talent to own a magic sword like his father. Therefore, the guy should rely on what he is really gifted. Indeed, after these words, it became easier for him. He no longer seeks to imitate other people's heroes, because he wants to go his own way. And he is still not sure whether this technique is suitable, because he still learns to master it. Neither the father nor the mother helped him with it. Says with confidence, only he decides what his path will be. The opponent became aware of the surprise hearing these words, but suddenly it began to annoy him. He instantly flashed from anger and strictly asked the boy not to joke with him. The Revol asked if he did not really want them to take the power of 7 heroes. After all, he believed, the responsibility of the second generation is to convey the power and great accomplishments of his famous predecessors to the next generations. The rival mentioned that he was always the one who was ahead of everything, but URZ never realized why there is so much anger in it. He turned to the man, saying that he understood his pride in the heroes. However, this will not change his own opinion. He came here to prove his own value. The young man lowered his head and explained that he was always talking so, but it was only more angry with the enemy, and he sent the sword directly to Urs. The young man, staring, sincerely apologized. Shrayan turned to Urs and said he had already drawn into the case. The opponent struck a lot of strong blows to the guy. Everyone was truly worried about him. The coach thought that people usually work only 30% of their capabilities, but in difficult life situations, they are able to reveal all their potential. Sometimes this is called entering the zone. Some even intentionally try to find themselves in this condition. Even Erza with his sharp vision was difficult not to let him out of sight. The successor tried to protect himself from the rival's blows and realized that things were bad. It was simply impossible to win in this situation. The coach, along with the Aram, decided that the moment had come to change something. He needed to wrap his entire body evenly with magical power that was dug from many channels open in torment. Everyone looked at this place with surprise, because they revealed the most powerful technique of physical reinforcement, which the King of Demons owned. Traynor said that green is a color that symbolizes the element of the earth filled with life and prosperity. It was such magic to him because he truly deserved it. It was a breakthrough of a great demon. Traynor turned to Urs and asked to tell himself until now. Urs replied briefly that he was the son of the hero. Traynor immediately asked the boy who he now became, and Urs replied that he became a student of the great King of Demons. Traynor asked the guy who he wanted to become, and then with confidence stated that he's seeking to become a new, true version of himself. We didn't just exclaim, everything happened, so let the mistakes prove it. Urs only now realized that he first heard the Traynor by his name. For the first time in his life, he was recognized not as a son of a hero, but as an heir of Reagan's. And now he will surely thank him for everything he did for him. And once again he thanks him, but this time, fists showing the power of his actions. After all, isn't it more pleasant to get a sincere gratitude than just buy a bunch of books? This is what Traynor believed when he heard these words. Suddenly, Traynor took advantage of the glowing blow of a great demon. The power of this technique was so powerful that rival could not resist. He rejected him far, and he crashed into the wall. The rival sat, leaning against the wall, and had no strength to even move. Everyone in the arena froze in silence, not knowing how to respond to them. Some from the crowd asked Fiona with interest what he won in this round. The man shouted loudly that there was a real madness in the arena. Janet's rival had just won. As soon as a man was about to announce who won them, his opponent had already held weapons in his hands and said confidently, "Imperial Sword." At the same moment, gathering all his forces, Revel rose into the air and rushed towards the ERZ. On the podium, everyone kept breathing because no one had no idea what it would happen. Suddenly, everyone around began to sound the name of the guy who was so worried. Eric slowly began to turn to his opponent, and at the same moment he saw him racing on him quickly. A few days before, during another training, Urgs turned to the coach and asked if he could master this technique. Traynor thought and reopened the conversation again, returning to the same technique. He was interested in the great demonic spiral breakthrough, called the Breakthrough of the Devil. The coach warned the guy that this technique is taking a lot of magical power, and it would not be easy to manage it. Or maybe just ask a guy, was everything really right? Traynor explained the boy that with the abilities he has now, he would have to train for a long time and persistently, at least half a year of daily hard work. The young man could not believe his own ears. He had almost no time to prepare. But in a moment, his opinion changed. He strongly said to Traynor that he still mastered it right now. So, standing in the middle of the arena and beating with the opponent, he applied a powerful dynamic rotation, the legendary spiral of Urza Breakthrough. Everyone who was nearby was frozen at surprise and could not understand what was happening in their eyes at all. Traynor could not believe that the ERZ decided to use such force without any training. He tried to call Erza, but he no longer heard his voice. He took a deep breath and turned to the eldest, looking forward to what was next. Urz was determined to win the tournament. But suddenly Ursa is hit straight into the face. His magical power gradually began to fade. The rival's blow was so strong that the hero rolled over his head and rolled his arena, not even getting up. The guy, gathering his last strength, stood up and looked at the opponent. But in front of him, he saw not only the enemy. The guy stood a mother and a hero. Both looked at him seriously, silently studying his eyes. Everyone whispered instantly, "This is the hero and mom of the 7 heroes." But why did they come into the arena so unexpectedly and stop the fight? The air scoot stood sharply and asked his father with an indignation why he came. After that, Lord the Hero announced the entire stadium that Urzarigan was disqualified, so the tournament would last without him. Urs was angry. He began to fall asleep his father, trying to understand what it means and why suddenly heard that he had been disqualified. At that moment, the whole arena suddenly heard a loud cry. Everyone immediately paid attention to a girl who trembled and screamed. From excitement, she dropped her basket. The sadist appealed to the young master Erza and asked why he was using the king of demons among all the participants of the arena. Trainer wondered if this girl was able to survive in Shisanodi. No one in the hall could understand what was really going on, and why Sadis spoke about the technique of the king of demons himself. Mama immediately rushed to Saida to calm her down. She gently asked why the girl was so scared, but Saidi only whispered the same thing. Before her, the king of demons. wasn't surprised for himself that he had never seen Side before so confused and frightened. Lord Hero told the boy that it was this tornado technique once used a demon lord to destroy Satis's hometown. The guy was extremely impressed with this, because he knew well that Saidi was an orphan who lost his family because of the war. But the hero did not even suspect that this technique was guilty of everything. He grabbed Urza by his hand and said time to go from the arena. The hero asks the guy where he learned about this technique and what he did until the hero was. He was very happy when he saw him, because this meeting brought him true happiness. But suddenly the father raises his hand and tries to hit the era in the face. The hero addressed his son to the question of what he was trying to do. In the end, the Imperial Knight would never take advantage of such a thing. The hero asked him if he was really ready to resort to even the most clear tricks to win the tournament. The EMF decided that it was a treacherous trick. The hero asked the guy once again if he could hear what his father was talking about, a thing that the knight would never take advantage of. Everyone who was present could not believe their eyes. It really happened. The son of the hero himself used the reception of the king demon. What a horror. They could not believe that he was using the enemy's technique. The children of the hero seemed to have completely lost dignity. Some were surprised at where he suddenly came from. Earlier, he also used completely crazy techniques. People whispered that he was just cunning, because he knows. Otherwise, he would not win. It was a real indignation. Eris heard all this, but he did not understand why everyone was saying so. The truth was completely different. People shouted to this boy that he was a failure and would never change. They reproached him for not even trying to win without the king of demons. Even the wall caused more regret than the guy himself. Everyone began to ask that Ersby would be taken from the arena. But the guy still believed that they were all wrong about it. Suddenly a train appeared in front of the ground. The demon asked the boy to pass Lord to the hero about his existence, and add that he had to take this step. After all, the hero knows what no one else knows, so he will believe that it exists. But the Red did not understand what Trinar was saying. The demon told the boy that only he was to blame for everything. It was impossible to pass on knowledge about the enemy of mankind. The guy, hearing it, asked Trinar to stop talking like that. It was thanks to him that he managed to overcome himself and become better. Sidi could still not recover, and her mother tried to reassure her. Asks a demon whether he was difficult for him when people tried to kill him. Trainer shouted to the man, which is not too late. He had a chance for forgiveness. But replied that no, he was always rescued only words. Brez assured Trainer that there was no guilt on him. A man with a smile on his face asked a demon, why not become his student? He had just shared with him his technique, but the demon was stunned by such words. Added that in these 2 months he gained a lot of experience and mastered new techniques, and now he simply could not allow him to take it all. Suddenly, URZ could no longer stand and attracted the attention of anyone who was sitting in the stands of the arena. He screamed loudly, demanding that you stop these meaningless shouts and silence for a minute. Addressed everyone and confessed that he was training for exhaustion, to master his own style. In this way, he had to endure a lot of pain and suffering. But in the end, it was because of this that he achieved what he wanted, and really mastered his skills. It was thanks to the reception that the mentor taught him that he was able to get up again and gather strength. It was the top of his journey, and he did not need their reproaches. The hero tried in any way to force the Arairor to silence, so that he would not spoil everything with his stupid words. But in response, he got a blow to the face from his own son. Everyone present at the podium was at the podium. No one could imagine that someone would be able to do so with the hero. Everyone around began to shout that he hit Mr. Hero himself. Erida and Irony turned to his father and looked mockingly, saying that he was last when he addressed him the word father. The man remembered his childhood and told everyone that he was only wounded all the time, constantly compared to someone else and demanded to achieve more than he could actually. But the hero never turned his eyes, even when everyone was calling him a second generation. Ertz, with heart pain, said he no longer wants to be his child, and in general it would be better if he had never been born in this world. Suddenly, someone from the podium shouted to the guards, ordered to grab it and immediately drive him out of that place. He was called a traitor among warriors, considering a shame for all. But suddenly URZ heard Fiona from Fufu was rushing to this guy. He asked the guys if they came to reproach him for the betrayal of his father and the whole country. But now it was no longer important to him. He had time to endure. At the same moment, he used a powerful dynamic spiral, the same spiral that punches all obstacles, even Erza. Fiona and Fuel immediately turned themselves off to avoid attack. When the smoke around Ursa dispelled, everyone saw that a huge hole appeared in that place. Everyone thought that Ursu was able to escape, but it was simply impossible. He could not disappear underground. Fiona rushed to the afternoon, but Fu had time to stop it. She shouted error to stop and did nothing reckless. At that moment, the guy flew down from the giant height. In his imagination, he drew a picture where they all, a team of heroes, walking together and having fun. It seemed to him that they would once be able to surpass their parents and become real superheroes. Subsequently, already adults, the guy remembered how his mother apologized again and promised that tomorrow they would surely take the day off. She promised him, and he believed to her. He also mentioned how he approached the session on her graduation and asked if she would leave them after graduation. The sight smiled gently and promised that she would never leave a young owner. But now Sadie was overwhelmed by fear, and she could not understand why the young master used the magic of the King of Demons. At that moment, the ERZ, using magic, broke through the earth and climbed to his feet, looking at the moon. Meanwhile, before the onset of the most terrible day in his life, there is no day. Gailey tiredly sank to the ground and wept bitterly. She screamed that the whole situation was a real curse for her. At that moment, the trainer sat nearby and watched his condition closely. He thought that this guy would not even be able to get up. But this is not surprising after everything that happened. After all, the limit of use of breakthrough is only 90 seconds. In addition, he used a breakthrough spiral twice. Eris turned to the coach and admitted that today in the tournament part of him sincerely hopes that he did not do. People will still compare him with his father. To be honest, he was already tired of the fact that everyone perceived him only as a son of a hero. That is why he did not use his father's techniques, but defended his own style. He sought to get rid of this label with all his heart. Finally, he seeks to get rid of the label of the hero's son, so that people begin to consider Erza Regan truly cool. But he did not even suspect that he was looking at him all this time as a hero's son. This guy realized the world is waiting for him to be the perfect hero. People did not even notice that he became stronger. From this he became very sad. We taught our listening to him, and then we sadly released his head. He replied to the man that there was only one way to fulfill his desire. Trenar explained the boy that in order to do so, he needed to exceed the hero himself. The demon decided to ask the guy why, in his opinion, the hero enjoys such respect in society. Everything is simple. It was he who defeated the demon, the owner of this world. The demon turned to Earths and told him that if he reached more, then everyone would know about the power of Earthsregan, regardless of whether or not people want it. But Erst still did not understand how he managed to surpass his father. We trained our people persistently, and in response he honestly confessed that he did not know it. The demon said it was possible to go to success in different ways, to unite the country or to invent something big. The only thing he was sure of was that the answer is not limited to this empire. The demon advised the guy not to stop only at the empire, but to direct his strength to the whole world and to all who live beyond. Let everyone hear his name. At this time, ERZ turned to Trenar, asking what they were talking about and how he was going to surpass his own father. The man recalled that Fu is the most prominent magician in the world. Ravel is an unsurpassed swordmaster, and Fiona is a real spear. Urs became the most powerful hero, surpassing even his own father. He realized that it was time to return to the basics. The young man stood up and said firmly, "Okay, they will do it. They will create a little more majestic than what his father has achieved. And this time he will do everything to be noticed. And no one will be able to ignore either him or his comrades." So they decided that the train R should go to the edge of the world. The head of the guard asked the rest if they managed to find Erza Regan, but the knights replied that they had already searched the entire 5th Street and found no one. And in the second place, it was not. The man thought in confusion, where could this boy go? Suddenly, his grandfather turned to his grandchildren and apologized to the knights. Then he asked them why they were turning entire quarters of the city upside down. Did something important happen there? The man turned to the old man and asked if he did not hear about the tournament today. After all, it was the loudest event since the end of the war. At that moment, her mother ran all over the house, looking into every room. She checked each corner carefully, looking for her room. But none of these rooms was in any of these rooms. She imagined that he could return home and waited for them there. Although the troops of the King of Demons have not yet been completely destroyed, all the knights were sent to his search. But there was no news about Urza yet, and the hero had already begun to look for traces outside the capital. And suddenly another detachment will come across the area first and start a fight. Then it will not be possible. Mom hopefully opened the closet, hoping that he may have hidden there. Mahmoud remembered the same moment in the tournament when Urs shouted to his father that he no longer wanted to be his son. At the same time, he added that it would be better if he was not born at all. Mom could not understand what had happened to him. Suddenly, his battle style has changed dramatically, and he began to use the techniques of a demonic king. Mom began to suspect that he had complexes through her and through the hero. She didn't even remember that Urza's room would be carefully looked at. Mam took the textbook and said she was feeling nostalgia. It was an academic textbook. Her old textbook looked even worse than this one. There were many bookmarks inside. She noticed that this textbook was different from what it was in her time. Mom suddenly noticed what a huge bookshelf in his room. It was almost completely filled with various directories and technical literature. She realized that even her generation and generation of the hero have not yet reached so far. The boy made so much effort that everyone was recognized, but instead of praise, he constantly listened to only criticism. And finally, she realized what complexes were. He was simply pressed by too many other hopes. She was well aware of what others had about him. But even against the backdrop of great efforts required by 7 heroes, she did not pay attention to his hard work. She has never seen it or understood it. The girl was amazed at how she admitted. She no longer understood what to do in this situation now. Mom dropped on her knees and began to apologize, sincerely saying she is very sorry. She apologized to her. Mom was covered by reproaches of conscience. She considered herself a bad mother. She had to be near when her son needed support. Her duty was to take care of him. But she felt that almost nothing was known. She did not even understand what was happening to him. She also knew nothing about the magical techniques of the King of Demons. At that moment, her mother heard Saidi's cry. She immediately ran to the girl and asked why she was here. My mother was surprised and wondered if Sadie had escaped from the hospital. Mom tried to stop Sadie, convincing her not to do so. She needed a break. But here, Sides addressed the lady and asked where the young gentleman was. She bowed her head and quietly reported that he escaped somewhere. Now they are still looking for him. Sita told that she heard. The nurse in the hospital said that all the Imperial Knights were sent to search for Urs, and if he was really relevant to the King of Demons, he would not be able to avoid punishment. The girl said that she had just heard it. She could no longer stay still. So she went to the city to look for him too. The girls hugged, and Mama assured the agriculture that everything would be fine. She promised that together with the hero they would not allow anything wrong. Meanwhile in the city, people were rumored. They say that Erza got into this competition by deception, and he gained his power through forbidden equipment. In fact, everything was not true. She noticed how the young owner was constantly training daily. However, the way he moved at the beginning of the duel undoubtedly testifies to the skill of the young owner. She tried to prove that he did not cheat. This was manifested by the true power of the young owner. The saddle believed that no one was as close to him as she was, and it was well understood. She asked her mother to bring the boy home. At that moment, Momo became even more upset. It seemed to her that she was just a terrible mother. He preferred Satas, and now she understands why he made that choice. Mama returned to Sadie's and said she needed her help. She had to learn everything about her baby. And even if it is too late, even if she was not the best mother, she still seeks to see him again. The girls sincerely believed that Urs would return to their home. Mom begged her son to give her another chance. At the same time, the carefree Ern walks along with the trainer. The guy asked the demon how long they were going on. Trainer thought for a moment and replied that they had been going on for about 3 hours. The young man grabbed his face and muttered with annoyance that these guys had tightened. Eris engulfed panic, and he shouted at demon that just a forest. Wherever you look, everywhere. He asked confusedly, "Where is the city?" The trainer calmly answered the boy that finding the city here is not as easy as it seems. But at least trainer suggested that the boy break the camp. URZ wondered what the field camp was talking about. The guy always believed that his father had power and money. He misses a soft crib and hard dishes, but it was at this moment that the trainer casts a blame for him. And at the same moment he remembered his main purpose, why he is here at all. The guy loudly stated that no, he came here not just, but to surpass his father. That is why they will create this camp. Erse returned to the coach and asked if the one knew how to organize the camp for them. The demon confidently replied that he undoubtedly knew how to do it. His head contains all the knowledge needed for survival. In his life, he often rested from political affairs, going for lonely hiking. However, the ERZ could not understand what the demon was saying when it came to such a waste of vacation. At times, he even seemed to spend his time alone because of his lack of friends. It tightened the coach, and he asked the boy to forget about this conversation. And suddenly the belly was loudly thwarted from an unbearable feeling of hunger. He explained the demon that first they needed to find food. Somehow, when they walked the forest, they suddenly noticed a huge rabbit. Rushed to him rapidly, shouting that the meat was finally found. But at the last moment, the rabbit had time to jump out of his ears and never hit his hands. Our hero from the acceleration gap to the ground. It became angry with him, and he robbed sharply on the rabbit. However, he never thought to stop. He shouted to a rabbit that encroaches on his meat, urging to stop. The desert was persecuted for a long time, but everything was in vain. When URZ was completely out of strength, he fell to the ground and confessed to the coach that he could no longer go beside him. The rabbit moved incredibly quickly. The coach only calmly replied that there was nothing surprising. Usually small animals are hunted with a small firearm. Trees, grass, and horrible roads make it difficult to move here. In addition, he is used to fighting only on a flat surface, and now these conditions are clearly not on his side. Urs lifted his head and looked at the rabbit, but suddenly the rabbit came closer to the boy and smiled at him. It was incredibly angry with the era. Trainer looked at Urs and immediately realized, this guy is completely without strength, incredibly exhausted. He promised Urza that he would support him in this case. Once the Urts approached the rabbit, he immediately rushed. The man tried to grab the rabbit again, but he cleverly slipped out of his hands. Urzi was again glowing to the ground. The Earth was confused and did not know what to do next. He focused on the development of his reflexes and the training of dynamic vision, which allowed him to better notice what is happening around her peripheral vision. His decision was quite simple. Immediately catch his eyes around, to understand the situation as soon as possible, and identify the most effective way of action. The coach, who was well dealt with in such matters, assured the guy that he would help him cope with this task. The coach will show him which direction to move. It will be like a ray of light that accelerates the darkness and points the way. But at first, the trainer told the boy that he would have to jump in the bush and stay there for 2 hours. The demon will give him special instructions that will allow them to catch the rabbit. Trainer thought it would be just for a child who is chasing magical steps all day, isn't it? So everything he has worked in himself thanks to a grueling workout could now be useful to him. IR again goes to the rabbit. Trinar helped him calculate the entire route, and eventually the boy managed to catch the rabbit. Everything he did day and night was sustained. The efforts were not in vain. Eris fell to the ground, but the rabbit remained in his hands. The guy could not believe that he still succeeded. He happily lifted the rabbit up and exclaimed that he could do it. He joyfully circled in the dance, holding the rabbit in his hands, and the coach, watching it, said with a smile that he finally coped. The trainer told the man that they could now start cutting. It was a lot of tissuing the guy, and he, with excitement in his voice, asked Demon that he meant. But trainer only kept a serious facial expression and asked the man, "Isn't it obvious?" The demon promised that he would kill him quickly, and then suck all the blood from him until the last drop. It laughed so much that he barely restrained the hysterical laughter and asked the demon to wait. The guy returned to trainer, asking what he needed to do. But why is he? In response, Trinar threw with sarcasm, "Do you see someone here?" But trainer asked that guy not to tell him that he did not want to do it, because he felt pity for this rabbit. It was stunned by the guy, and he fell. He said he would not say that. Suddenly, 2 more rabbits appeared in front of them, and the guy immediately noticed it. Urs looked at them carefully, and asked the trainer why they were looking at him. The rabbit had tears in his eyes, and then the guy finally realized. They were all one family. Eretz sincerely sympathized with the little rabbit, because he did not want his parents to witness his baby's death from his hand. Urs asked adult rabbits not to look at him with such compassionate eyes. He became awkward, and he explained that he was just trying to survive, that's all. The guy tried to cope with his emotions. His soul was torn into pieces, and he had no idea how to deal with such a situation. But the guy could not hold back his feelings, because he had already decided everything for himself. He exclaimed so loud that he was heard from afar, "I will call him a falling star!" Urs, meanwhile, released the rabbit to his parents and wished him to return to his family. The rabbit immediately jumped in the bush and disappeared with his parents. Through all this, Trainart was increasingly filled with anger. He tried to find out this guy why he did so. Why did he allow the rabbit to escape? It was their only food. URZ was confused and did not find words to explain. Trainer did not stop shouting at him until he tried to understand whether he was aware of what position he was. After all, if he does not eat now, then he will simply die in place, and his honor only complicates their situation. Feeling shame, Urs still said a demon that he understands him, but the coach continued to shout at him, repeating that he did not understand what he really did. Suddenly the boys heard a very loud and sharp sound. They immediately turned into this noise, but did not see anything suspicious. Burr was alerted, hearing a stranger. Something was clearly wrong. They were rapidly approaching an extremely loud noise. Trinar and Ur froze on the spot, listening carefully to each rustle around. Suddenly, at that moment, they noticed a huge paw that stepped straight on them. Just in front of them put a giant monster much larger than Trinar and Ur's. The young man could not believe his own eyes. The boys stood in front of a mysterious giant monster and could not understand what it really was. The boys looked with horror on a huge plow. The warriors are considered a race of demons with unprecedented power and skill in battle. These creatures are known for their fury and cruelty, and many people died from their hands. Ogre captured many cities and villages. Aaron remembered how he was told in his childhood. If he behaved unhappy, he would eat a real monster. Trainer was also terribly stressful, and said directly to the interlocutor that they had a bad thing. Ogre are some of the most powerful demons in the world. Therefore, to challenge them would be true madness. Urz began to panic strongly. It seemed to him that he just lacked the strength for magic. He was completely confused and did not understand what to do in such a situation. Suddenly, the OGR returned to the boy and asked if he did not get lost. The Era was scared and shouted at the Sake so that he did not fit closer. He threatened that if he was even closer, he would regret it. The OGR noticed that the guy was starting to panic. Then he stopped the errors and said he didn't want to fight with him. Both the guy and the demon were surprised, because they did not expect to hear such words from the plowman. EMF did not understand what was happening and why it was suddenly anxiety. And now the OGR shouted to him, assuring that everything is true, and promised that he would do nothing. So there is nothing to be afraid of, Ears. Air mentally asked his coach, what did the words of this ogre mean? He thought that he probably wanted him to lose his vigilance. But the demon, who carefully watched the behavior of this ogre and studied him well, replied, no, that's not. Ogre do not have such a trick or mind. Ogress turned to the guy and asked if he was annoyed because of hunger. Then he invited him to home, promising to treat a delicious treat. It scared the guy again, and he asked the plowman frightenedly, what do you mean? They just met, so how can he just believe him? Ours mentioned that these creatures steal people and eat them. Everything happened exactly as it was written in the books. The coach turned to the guy and asked him to calm down. He clearly does not want to kill him. The demon even believes that this guy really cares about him. But if it refuses, it will be left without food. Because of this, the next day, he will not be able to regain his strength. The ER tried to deny the Trinar, but he did not even listen to him. Seeing that the young man was genuinely frightened by the monster, the Ogre was upset. He sighed and told the boy that he was not surprised now why people were so afraid of warfare. He apologized to ERC for not thinking about it before. The monster suggested that it be taken to the city. The ERZ thought that they were so treated by racial bias. He felt it when he took advantage of the king of demons. Then the guy realized, he is no different from those people. Urs turned to the monster and sincerely apologized to him. The guy confessed that he showed so much kindness for him. He had never seen warfare before, so at first he worried a little. It's just a prejudice. The guy tried to continue the conversation with Ogrom, but as he did not try, he did not find the necessary words. Suddenly everyone was heard as a stomach was stuck again. Such words cheered the cucumber, and he with a joking smile added that he seems like his stomach was quite empty. The monster assured that everything was fine, and invited him to go for himself. After all, he just caught the prey. Ur thanked the monster for his care. They walked the path that led into the thickening of the forest. Ogre returned to the boy and asked how to call his name. The young man replied that his name was ERD. He thought that if he named his name, he could recognize him. And it was then that the OGR said that Urz was a good person. The young man was quite surprised to hear and asked the monster that he had just said. The giant repeated again, he is really good. Everyone whom he only met in his way was afraid of him, because Akka was a real OGR. But was different. She trusted him. Bress replied that he was not the best of all others, because he also called on the monster. The OGR said to the boy that he was forgotten by those words and accepting his help. It makes him happy. Ararat was surprised to see how a huge ogre was calm. Is he not too good to him? Suddenly, the monster said to the boy that they finally got. It was his home. The monster apologized to the guy for a mess, and Urz just waved his hand and said that there was nothing wrong with that. At that moment, the guy turned his head and noticed that there were beds nearby. He wondered in the plow of what he was doing in the forest. To which the monster calmly answered, yes, he has a small garden, and he grows vegetables there. Ogre pushed the curtain in front of the guy, and URZ asked the monster whether he really lives here alone. Ogre replied that there was no one except him inside, therefore you can safely go. Looking back, the guy noticed that a small bonfire had burned in the middle of the house. The monster invited him to sit, and in the meantime he decided to prepare dinner. Ur thought that this house was not at all looked at the houses she saw in the Empire. Because furniture and different things here are noticeably other sizes, Trainer told him that such houses are already being built in the countries of the East. but you can see that it is a little sloppy in work. It seems that this Ogre has built a house on its own. The young man was genuinely surprised by such an opening and informed Trainer that this monster himself grows vegetables and even hunts. Moreover, he also built his home on his own. Trainer confessed to him that, unlike this plow, he was terribly tired, trying to catch at least one rabbit. So he was not at all like Erza. The demon only smiled quietly at these words. Suddenly, Urs felt a familiar, pleasant aroma of dishes that came from the kitchen. Ogre left the kitchen and told the guy that everything was ready. The monster put dishes on the table that looked very tasty and impressed with their beauty. Seeing them, Urz was incredibly surprised. He turned to the plow and asked if he bought it all over the market. The monster only shook her head. No, she did not buy anything of it. On the plate lay the meat of the beast, which he had just hung, salad of wild plants and vegetables from his own garden, and also a cereals from the demonic world, which people call rice. Ogre confessed to this guy that he had never tried it, but he was curious. He stretched out a fork, and it surprised him too. The Ogre wished her delicious, and the guy immediately took up food. Having tasted the first piece of meat, he felt an incredible explosion of tastes. The fragrant sauce gently enveloped the meat, and the crispy crust melted in his mouth and pleasantly warmed the stomach. Having tried rice from the demonic world, the guy felt immediately he is much more saturated than most other varieties. The dish was juicy. The taste was so liked by the guy that he was truly delighted. Further, his attention was attracted by a fresh, juicy salad. The guy was convinced that if he did not follow the rules of decency, the sadist would be angry with him. But he still decided to try. The guy stabbed a fork a little salad and ate immediately. Eris was delighted with such an exquisite taste. The salad had fresh vegetables and tender meat. He could not stop and ate everything again and again. Seeing the guy caresses him, they were a little scared. The monster returned to the Erza and asked why he had tears in his eyes. But did not understand what he implies. It was angered by the plowman, and he asked the guy that he had prepared such, why the dish was so tasteless. But the guy only froze, not to answer because his mouth was stuffed with food. The young man lifted 2 fingers, showed them to another boy, and not stopped chewing, looked at him calmly. When the guy milked everything to the last crumb, he apologized to the monster and explained that the food was so delicious that he did not resist and hurried, even made a strange face. And he cries because he fled from the house. The guy confessed that he could not tell how everything happened. He just added quietly that he could not return home, so he decided to understand himself. However, even today he lacked food. The boy's body began to tremble, and he confessed that after he tasted the dishes, he recalled his home again. I offended him much. Realized that he would not be able to return home because it was his own choice. He only had to move forward. But suddenly Aka's Ogre also showed the guy 2 fingers. He smiled kindly to the young man and added that he should also be thanked. He is a cucumber, but the battles are called at once. AKA Urs told that people were scared of his appearance, so he went into the woods, so that no one is frightened. Since then, he has spent his life in this forest for over 10 years. So he was very pleased that the guy was not afraid. He also thanked him for evaluating his treat, calling the food delicious. The Ogre told the young man that Urs was a wonderful man. And Urs believed that a wonderful person was the same as being AKA. But because he is a Ort, this label left him lonely. AKA can't even get out of the forest. AKA he returned to the era and asked if he could tell him more about these people. The Ogre thought that if you get acquainted with people better, it may be possible to find friends. Eris wondered in Aqua, which he is talking about now. The guy smiled gently with the plow and asked if they were not friends now. It moved deeply. The guy was sincerely surprised to hear, and Akka repeated once again that Urz was always very kind to him. Ever since his childhood, he was surrounded by people from the Empire who looked at him from above, and classmates sought to make friends only because he was the son of the legendary hero, Lord the Hero. The bird could not imagine that he would ever have friends with whom he would be able to communicate as equal with equal. He was deeply moved by how the Ogre reacted to his words. The bird only asked Ak to cry because of it. Deep in the soul of Urs realized that I was really glad because he left the Empire. Trainer told the man that the son of the one who once defeated the king of Demon now calls Demon his friend. This was incredibly impressed. Suddenly, Trainer Geese suddenly stumbled and fell on some objects hidden under the mysterious blanket. It took some time and the morning, aka, he showed the man the road and explained that the river was leaking next to her. If you move along the river in the direction of the mountains, sooner or later it will be in the city. Urs thanked Akka, and the Ogre cleared his clothes for shine. AKA just smiled and told the boy that it was not difficult for him. Ogre asked the guy if he was really sure of his decision not to go home. The guy replied that yes, because he would still not be able to return there. The ER approaches the plow and asks whether he needs something from the city. But this man just thought that he should get out of the Empire as soon as possible. The ERZ appealed to AKA, and he said he wanted to thank him for everything he did for him. The guy added that they just became friends. Will he not be alone? Once he will definitely return to him. These words moved this cucumber, and he said that Urs was a good man, but the guy smiled and replied that he had long realized. Brez wondered in the plow that he wanted him to bring him. The man suggested that you bring some furniture or tools. The guy heard in response from AKA that in fact he just wanted to taste the cake. Such an answer was quite surprised by the guy. AKA, he told Errors that he heard, cakes that people prepare are always so sweet, tender, and delicious, so he really wants to taste them at least once in his life. To this Errors replied that I was glad, because AAA, he understands him well. Error was already going to get away from the plow, promising that he would return soon, but AAA. He stopped him, asking him to wait and not go so far. He reached out to him and informed him that he was giving it to him. Ursa was surprised to address the monster, asking who he was. AKA, he told him that he was a mascot from his hometown. He was made on his own, so he looks a little awkward. Ayers wondered in the plow of whether he really did this thing on his own. The OGR with the nickname AKA confirmed that, yes, everything is true. He carved it from a tree, because carpentry is his favorite hobby. AKA. He confessed that he wanted to make this adventure as safe as possible, and sincerely hopes that the mascot scared away from her any danger. The young man smiled a monster and thanked him for such a wonderful gift. He promised AKA, which would protect this thing as a real treasure. AKA returned to the guy again and showed him 2 fingers for the second time. Her finally realized that he would never be able to forget the tears of happiness on the face of the aqua. And in response, this guy also showed him 2 fingers. He said goodbye to the monster and said it was time to go on. In the forest clearly heard the rapid, stupid paw of Ursa. He rushed forward, putting all his strength in every step. Trainer decided to ask the guy whether he had a free workout. URC answered something like, yes, that's yes. Recalling the journey he made yesterday, he tries to understand how to build something like this in his own way. Trinar warned the guy that he could get so admiring that he would move away from the right path. So you need to be careful. Eris only nodded and replied that he understood all this. Aird said he should buy a souvenir today, and still need to stock up on tools. Suddenly, Trainer asked the guy if he had any money at all. The guy froze from confusion when suddenly remembered that he had only an empty wallet in his pocket. Some time has passed, and the URC, along with Trainer, finally reached the guild. At the entrance, the administrator once again asked the guy if he really wanted to work as a guard. However, he had to refuse registration. He explained that he had never graduated from the academy, and did not have documents that could confirm his identity. However, Erst decided to try luck and asked the registrar to ask, would there be a single opportunity to register? He has already agreed to any job in the guild, but the man replied that no was impossible. The register explained that in the guild, when they are hired, they always require a document confirming the person, or you can show a certificate of graduation. After all, every hunter and his or her identity must report the Empire. And now he will not find guilds that do not follow these rules. Only illegal shops and anarchists remained. This is incredibly angered by the guy. He understood that even if he had this document, he would still know that he was Urs Regan. In the end, his father, Lord, would probably know where he is. Suddenly, heard someone approaching him from behind and asked the boy if he had already finished. Behind him was a guy and said Eris not to delay, and if you have already finished, then let it go. Ellis was very discouraged, immediately turned away and apologized to the guy. The guy went to the rack and told the administrator that he was a Fuma of Nukanins. He said he came to share what he recently found in the forest. Sadia left guild, carrying heaviness on his heart. The guy asked Trainer what to do now. Even it did not dream that he could not find his work. But Trainer reminded that first you need to get a person's certificate. The demon noted that people have a tendency to complicate everything, even their own life. Although if a person can work, what is the value of his status? In response, the ear said that it was necessary to leave the boundaries of the Empire as soon as possible, because otherwise he would not work out. Suddenly the guy heard loud screams nearby. People stood next to him and shouted that it was simply incredible. 20 wins in a row. Who is this girl? There was such a noise in the Erstube room that everyone was surprised. The demon suggested, why not look there and see what happens? The guy came out in advance and noticed that 2 people were enthusiastically playing a game. The birds instantly realized that they were a real battle test. The Battle Go game is a table competition in which black and white stones converge in a duel to conquer the opponent. We thought about it and mentioned the words of Train. As far as he knows, he had it. Urs asked the demon once again whether it was true, but he did not even pay attention to her. The guy standing at the wagon thoughtfully lifted his eyebrow and asked the demon whether he was familiar with this game. The demon only smiled mysteriously and replied that, of course, he knew about her. Coaches have said that the history of this game has reached more than 1,000 years in the past. It was very popular even among demons. In addition, in those days, his blows called the King of Demons. Urs asked Trainor, "If the King of Demons began to act, then you will somehow call him any other?" The trainer nodded in response, admitting that the ERZ was right. Then the man asked if there would be someone else who dared to participate in the game. But no one would have a desire to try. He asked the audience as a brave who wants to challenge a waste runoff from Japanese. The young man looked at the girl and wondered. She had already won so many parties in a row in the game of Go. But who is she? She seems to be as many years as he himself. In addition, the guy suggested that the girl was probably originally from Japan. It was strikingly different from the people of the empire. Trainer explained to the man that these people were not ordinary residents of Japanese, but most likely real warriors. Finally asks a demon that he meant by remembering the Japanese warriors. The demon explains, "They are samurai." Trainer replied them this was not quite true. Most likely they are not samurai. Then the man asked all those present again if no one wanted to play with her. In the end, the winner will receive a monetary reward, as much as 100,000 suburban. At that moment, ER began to think that he had a chance to win this monetary reward. But Shinobu's returned to the cog and said that he did not shout so loudly. In the end, they have already earned enough. In addition, she already understood well at what level the locals play here. It was time for time. But there was no aninimer ray of hope in this game. At that moment, the ERZ realized that if he loses, he would also be forced to give the same amount of money. Shinbu with a smile noted that, among other things, she was also a beauty. And indeed, her figure attracts her eyes, is it not? But it stunned everyone in the room. Shinobu said that that is why she does not like the empty views of nearby people. She sighed heavily and added that beautiful women were not easy to live. It began to annoy Urza, and he decided that the girl was just modest. However, he did not even think of what he really had. Suddenly, the crowd began to ask what this girl was saying. Everyone knew that she was playing a combat goal. But of course her true power was striking even more. Shinobu suggested that the boys close the store as soon as possible and return to their brother. Urz thought that no one wants to walk with her. But is she really so strong? Then the coach told the boy that it was possible to win a cash reward here. He suggested that Urz come and play with the girl. But Urz looked at the demon at first, as if asking him a silent question. The guy asked to wait for a demon and sincerely confessed that he had never played in the Battle of NGO. Trainor assured the boy that he did not need to do anything at all. He asked Trainor in surprise what we were talking about. Urz wondered if he could help him. Suddenly Shinobu and Koga were heard as called them to stop and wait for him. He announced that he wanted to participate and try to talk to the girl. Everyone around the breath was in surprise. Everyone around began to whisper. He was so young and already decided on this step. For all, this seemed true boldness. Everyone wished him good luck, and Urz sat opposite the girl. Himb wondered the guy if he was about her age. Urz said that he was 15 years old. She thought a little and said she was as many years old. Judging by his appearance, she suggested that he was from the Empire. But despite it, he did not seem particularly strong. Initially, the hero wondered if they were really discussing it right in front of him. Shinobu said it did not matter to her. She advised the boy to just enjoy the game, and Koga announced loudly that the game begins. Shinobu told the guy that giving him the right of the first move. Urz thanked the girl with a barely noticeable irony and, a little nervous, took the stones in his palm. Then Trainor advised the young man to move up and right, to the corner. This is the strategy that is called a star attack. The new moon did everything as the demon advised him. The Shinobu watched the course and thought. She asked the guy if he really used strategies in ancient games. Trainor calmly answered her that, of course, she was using techniques that were popular 15 years ago. The girl raised the stone and decided where she went on. But suddenly the girl's eyes were wide open. She suddenly began to get rid of, and the guy was sitting nearby, not understanding what was happening to her. Why did she so unexpectedly start behaving strangely? A panicked Tyre started shouting that this is not what everyone thinks about. Everything that is happening now is just an unexpected attack of a small detachment. Trainor laughed and asked if she really wanted to destroy these stones. The girl thought and decided that if she does not remove them, he would get to the main camp. The coach thought that in such a situation, the protection of this girl would break. He was extremely interested in how she would behave if she finds herself without protection. At that moment, Urz returned the Trainor and asked him to explain what was happening in the game so that he could understand the situation. However, Shinobu sighed hard, realizing that she would have to do it. The girl shouted loudly that she was taking the call. The coach was happy and exclaimed what he said. He knew. Everything happens exactly as she dreamed. Trainer called the girl loudly to lean before his victorious attack, but Shinobu couldn't believe it. She did not want to say goodbye to her inaccessible fortress. At that moment, the Shinobu cleared his teeth with all his strength, and then the girl lowered her head and said quietly that she would not fight anymore. Everyone who was present immediately exploded with joyful exclamations. No one could believe their own eyes. Yours still felt a little upset, because he won, not even understanding how it happened. Koga was also amazed and asked if Miss Shinobu really lost. At first he turned to the cog and asked where his reward. The girl confidently answered the boy that, as promised, the prism would definitely reach him. The path stretched the era with a money bag. But suddenly, the Shinobu grabbed the guy by her shoulder. She, with a crazy fire in her eyes, asked Erza if he did not want to play with her again. is desperately trying to slip out of the girl's arms, explaining to her that they did not agree on it. Moreover, he does not need her money at all. Shinobu confidently answered the guy that she had never lost his peers, neither in battle, nor in grades, nor in beauty. However, this guy thought that he actually plays not with her, but with a trainee. Shinobu confessed to Urz that even she has no room for a living now. She has not felt such strong, uncontrolled emotions for a long time. And how do we work out in such a game and ask this guy, what would he do? After all, the demon can play this game as much as he wants. But the warned him not to do so. It seems to him an unnecessary hassle. Eris returned to the girl and said he had his plans, so he would not have. It upset Shinobu, and she replied that she understood everything. Then she decided to go with him. It was angry with Erza, and he asked her what she thinks. Koga turned to the lady and wanted to report that they also had their plans, and Shinobu interrupted him, strictly ordered to silence. The girl looked at the boy with crazy eyes and again asked if he could go with him. After all, he had a real chance to be next to such a sweet girl. Suddenly, something slipped out of the girl's sweater and fell near the boy's. Air immediately understood. What flew into the air was a girl's chest. The tire was terribly lost because of everything that happened. Without hesitation, she jumped on her immediately. She leaned against her breasts and began to fussily crawl under a sweater. After that, she returned to the boy. She smiled charmfully and asked him to forget everything he had just seen. The girl quickly broke from the place and immediately rushed to flee from the boy. Koga, along with her assistant, tried to roll the girl and stop her, but she didn't even stop. Then the boys rushed after her. After a while, Urz visited the sweets store. In the showcases, he was waiting for many bright, appetizing cakes. The young man looked at all these delicacies and confessed to the seller that he had no idea about such a variety of cakes. In his thoughts, the guy turned to Trinar, asking if he knew the one. But Trinar just spread his hands. How do we know? The demon advised, if you want to make a gift, it is better to choose a cake with a cream. And if you need something cheaper, take a cupcake. Urs thought about these words. He turned to the seller and asked the guy to try all the kinds that was, one piece. But this decision was quite annoyed by the trainer. Urs told him that if they buy everything in a row, then they would not miss anything. Moreover, they now have a lot of money, so it's not a problem. But the coach answered the boy that it was not in money. He noticed it in his bookstore when he asked the seller to sell him all the books. Trainer then asked the man whether he was able to dispose of money at all. It was angry with Erza, and he annoyedly replied to the demon that it was not true. He told Trainer that the princess behaved even worse. On his birthday, she ordered a giant cake. But Trainer asked not to compare him with her. The saleswoman told the Era that he would have to wait a little while she saves the cake. Then the replied that he just waited for a cup of tea and a piece of pie. And Trainer was indignant again. The tea was poured for Erza, and it was comfortable at the table. The guy asked Trainer if he was hungry as dead. We need to learn how to understand this correctly and train our thoughts in this direction. He answered the man that after the loss of his body, this desire had disappeared. Then Urz wondered if he sometimes has a temptation to taste the dish if it looks very appetizing. Trainer replied that he was not, though he confessed if he had happened to be an unfamiliar dish, he may have become interested in her. Urz nodded and said he understood him. The guy approached the seller and asked him. After a brief conversation, he returned to the table. After a while, the seller asked for a delay. He put the second dessert in the form of a table. Then the trainer saw it and looked at the guy with surprise, waiting for the explanation. But Urz did not know how to explain it. The young man said the demon that he realized. The demon was not going to eat it, and there is no point in that. But he considers it a kind of reward. It is just easier for him to show his true feelings. But the merchant noted that he just spent money in vain. Eris quickly replied that he knew it. He will leave this part and eat himself later. And yet, Trainer dared to accept his feelings. Suddenly, the boys heard people approaching the windows and began to ask what was happening there. Urs immediately noticed the smoke that rising from the mountain. Out the outside, they saw that the forest had covered the flames. One of the present called it new cannons. Then another man asked what he was in mind. The man explained that he learned from the Hunters Guild. Like, these people are hunters from Japanese. They are preparing to go hunting for a demon that occurs from time to time in the forest. Bress immediately guessed that they were talking about AKA, and it scared him. After a while, the seller apologized to the ERZ for expectations. By that moment, the girl had already completed the packaging of cakes. But she noticed that they never had them on the table. She never understood where they went. At this point, EMF rushed to the house of IKA, desperately trying to make it in time. He quickly and cleverly jumped through the fallen trees, hurrying as if he had driven an important thing. Ers wondered. Not about AKA. Those men spoke then? But AKA, he just lives quietly at home and does not touch anyone. Traynor told the guy that the cannibal confessed. Everyone he met was afraid of him. He himself does not remember when he met them. But he was convinced that as soon as the hunters learn such news, they will immediately take action. Traynor told the boy that he better understands how it was to feel fear of giants. He realized that everyone with whom he met for the first time was afraid as he himself. He had to hurry up to help AKA, otherwise hunters could deprive him of his life. The tray owner tried to say something to this guy, but he did not hear him and asked again. Suddenly, heard that someone else turned to him. Ahead, the guy noticed a man. He turned to Urs and asked in surprise why he was screaming alone in the forest. After all, there is a dangerous OGR. That is why the passage is further closed. At first, he asked the boy if he was the same hunter from Japan. The young man wondered what he really knew about them. At the same time, he came to the conclusion that they were really very popular. But then Traynor still decided to warn Erza and advised him to be careful with this man. After all, they were surrounded on all sides. Traynor reported that one enemy was right behind them, and one more, a little right and behind him. Although they are hunters from the guild, it does not mean that they are weaker than him. The man returned to Eris and said that if he wanted to go on, it is better to look for a detour, so he asked not to interfere with their work. The ER addresses the guy, saying that he has one question about just in case. Or they asked what would happen to the site further. He did not think for a moment that he could be killed. And if suddenly such as he is not alone, then they are simply destroyed to the last. The guy noted Erza that he was still too young, and apparently did not imagine what it could lead to if you just leave these monsters to be. Once upon a time, the army of demons consisted of many demons and monsters, and the most cruel among them were Ogre. They always went first into battle and destroyed all people on their way. After the king of demons won, he finally prevailed in the world. But even with his death, the remains of the enemy army scattered around the planet. They still sharpen their fangs, saying revenge. As everyone is in danger, ordinary people are strictly forbidden to appear in this area. Ayres was convinced that AAA will not take revenge on them. He is friendly and diligent, always seeks to help others and make new friends. The guy apologized to Urs for not allowing him to go on. Then the ER carefully asked if they could release this plow this time. Traynor immediately turned to Urs. However, the ERZ did not pay attention to him and turned to the hunter, saying that yesterday this OGR had saved his life. Traynor put his hand to his face, and Urs continued to tell that at first he was very afraid of him. But after talking to him, he realized that Traynor was really very good. The guy confessed that he got lost in the forest, but the giant treated him with food and gave him a night. Moreover, he led the boy to the city and even wanted to make friends with a person. The hard made the hunter think about the words of Urs. He turned to a guy who had just joked with, and said, if he was going to get them with his nonsense, then it is better not to waste their time on it. But EMF could no longer tolerate it. He pushed the hunter and ordered him to leave. After all, the life of his friend was at stake, and now they are trying to kill him. At the same moment, a smoke curtain suddenly appeared around the earth. He saw nothing and did not understand where to run. Suddenly, a powerful blow hit his neck. It was a tire. The hunter asked the girl what she was doing here. Shinob looked at the boy and noted that she saw him recently. The hunter asked the girl if she was familiar with him. Shinoba calmly replied that she knew a little. She had already seen this man in the city. Give him a little rest, let him sleep. But suddenly Shino was heard nearby. The girl looked around and saw Urza woke up just behind her and had already got to her feet. The Shinob was amazed, because she was sure that he was definitely without his senses after his stroke. The young man smiled and answered her. Yes, almost. Er was sure that if he had not bent at that moment, the arrow would certainly hit the target. Hinobo asked the guy if he was really going to fight with all of them. He did not even think and replied that, of course, he was ready to do it. No matter how much they will be, it will make them skip it further. The guard returned to the Shinob and told her to stay still. In the end, there is no point in 3 adults to compete against the child. In this case, he himself will cope. The guard immediately rushed at the guy, but he cleverly used his skills of Japanese running to avoid attack. At that moment, the trainer watched him closely and was convinced that he was moving quickly enough. But to be more precise, he skillfully uses his feet and moves so clever that you do not even have time for his movements. However, it was no longer a threat to the Herze, which was a harsh training. Ernst stopped the security guard and greeted him with a sparkle, smiling with the obvious laugh. Urz skillfully repelled the guard, and all those present were frozen. They did not believe their eyes. It seemed simply impossible. But the ER told the soldiers that he was quite capable of doing the same. The ERZ applied the legendary demonic step. The warriors could not believe their eyes. He used the technique of running, which was known only in Japan. But coach, I thought that everything was going wrong. It was these steps that he learned to do confidently, training on the stairs day by day. Like Japanese skill, it adds false movements to confuse the enemy. His movements have become even more agile, and now it is even easier for him to confuse the enemy. Rushed to Shinobu. However, one of the warriors instantly stood in defense of the girl, trying to stop the attack of the boy. But the warrior never understood how tricks his false movements. Because of these reflections, he got a blow. The warrior could not hide his curiosity. Who is this mysterious Sky? After all, it's not just a baby, so you should not relax, otherwise we are defeated. Trainer always considered them the true masters of their business, but it seems that he overestimated their abilities. If you compare them with the swordmaster and his lightning technique, they undoubtedly act slower than him. The warrior turned to and said that he would have to get even more to defeat this enemy. Erara was asked what he was going to do next. The demon explained to him that in the Empire it was called a spell. In Japan, there are 2 villages of warriors. They live courageous people who own a sword, and all call them samurai. At the same time, there are other people, those who secretly protect Japan and call them ninja. The warrior used the ninja wind against the Erza. The air was spiral vortex. Urs looked at the warrior and explained that it was essentially the magic of the wind. The ECR called the magic of the earth and raised a strong earthen wall. It was terribly surprised by the warrior, and he could not hurt how it could happen. Anders did not stop. He struck his fist on the ground and the wall, as if trying to release all his anger. It scared the warrior, and at the same moment he realized the stones were thrown only to distract. Urs struck the warrior just in his face, and he immediately raced past the tire. The guy was delighted with it. Urs noted that the Japanese ninja was not so strong. But Trinar asked the guy not to rejoice, because he believed that they were still too weak, while the ERZ thought that the demon perhaps in fact praised him. Although Trainer did not expect anything extraordinary, he still knew that ninja usually skillfully possessed the art of sudden attack and went unnoticed. However, this time they were not lucky. They immediately got into the best situation, forced to fight just in the forehead. In addition, we have improved our real warrior skills to be able to resist even the 2nd generation. That is why the usual fighter will not be able to overcome this opponent. However, the trainer worried something. Then Nob turned to her and said that he was really very strong. He so quickly and easily overcame the Yoga and Kohu. If it were not for these circumstances, she might even fall in love with him. At first, he asked the girl if everything was right. Unfortunately, it is not attracted to girls who wear an artificial bust and deceive boys. Hearing this, the tire thought and gently replied that she was really sorry. However, emotions completely captured it at this moment. He had no idea that in her heart really glowed a real thirst for murder. Tsunoba told ER that in Japanese no rival was able to defeat her, neither in the game in Geo nor in beauty competitions, and even in duels. No one was equal to her. Then the girl got her weapon. She continued the story, explaining that of all the 7 heroes, only one was highlighted by Master Kadziro, his own older brother whom he recognized. Trine was tense and confused, thinking if she was really a student of this ninja. And then Shinobu, with a mad glitter in her eyes and a mysterious smile, invited Urza to immerse himself in a real swirl of emotions. It was Ninja who remained in the shadow, unnoticed by helping Yapakia to retain their strength. Even when the garbage was small, Thor impressed her to the depths of her soul, and she just admired it without even thinking about the little things. Having a great desire to achieve her goal, she joined ninja school, and the girl immediately began to be celebrated, successfully performing all the tasks one by one. Teachers sincerely congratulated the girl with her success. Everyone was fond of its wonderful results. However, its light went out much faster than she could imagine. One day, the girl sat in the lesson and thought that the teacher explained the material quite unsuccessfully. It seemed to her that instead of this theory, it would be better to use another. The girl was thinking that she would finish this school soon, and as soon as she started working, she would immediately escape from this mediocre place. She was very hoping for it. Ninja worshipped her husband, and he declared them that today they would accompany and protect their eldest son of the Ogorezi family. The place of action is Itaba. It is here that the events of the favorite history of Rezi unfold. He asked the warriors to dress in the costumes of the heroes of this story and entertain the boy, showing a real theatrical act. From this, the soldiers felt terrible fatigue. He approached, apologized to the man, and explained that they were ninja, and their work was to fight. Therefore, they simply cannot participate in theatrical performances. The man was angry, and he turned to his ego, demanding that he be allowed to be resent. The war with the king of the demons finally ended, and calm in the country. Now they cannot be heard the avid battles they have been looking for so long. They are still well accepted, because as one of the 7 heroes of Kohiro, they were allowed to settle in this house due to their landmark merit. Those who think only of battles became hired murderers, and some make money by selling their own body. So if they realized it, they should be given a good thing. These words upset this girl. She suddenly realized that she never understood why she went for her dream all this time. Aigu said, "They leave Yapanea. Here, nothing makes their heart beat faster." The guys realized that this country is no longer needed by ninja. They only have a cold heart that forced to do meaningless things just out of duty. But Shinoba fought until she met Urs. When the guy looked at the girl, he immediately noticed. Something in her changed. Her aura became completely different. She was the weakest among all, and he thought to be afraid of nothing. The guy tried to take his hands and tame panic, but suddenly the guy noticed how the tire began to throw knives into him. He barely managed to evade one of them. It was very surprised by the Shinob, and she noticed the boy that he had a wonderful reaction. However, the girl was not going to give up, so she immediately threw all the knives at once. The man barely had time to evade this show of weapons. Urs was in surprise to think how they managed to fly so without a single pause. Then Trainart turned to the boy and explained that it was kunai. It is a special weapon used by ninja for throwing. He was a master of hand-to-hand combat, but he was not lucky with opponents. So I had to act carefully, gradually get closer and impose a short distance. The guy just was going to see what was happening, but suddenly noticed how a huge log was flying in his direction. The Ariris again miraculously evades him. He asked in surprise that it was a deck. Trainer replied to the man that it was a trap. Now it became clear to him why that opponent seemed so easy. It was only a bait. The whole plan was created only for the sake of winning the boy's heart. The Shinob did not stop for a moment. She was without stopping knives and logs in the Urs, but Air was still able to dodge the blows. Shinob noted that, as you can see, he perfectly notices even the smallest details. But this time she decided not to apply a direct attack, but the magic of ninja water, called a dense fog, hiding herself in his thick arms. URC was genuinely surprised to see and once again asked if it was really fog. Trainer told him that Shinob had decided to hide in the fog, which means that the situation became serious. She almost completely restricted him with a review. Besides, a Shinob is one of the best ninja. He was probably going to indicate his location, but Trainer did not have time to treat. It was at this moment that URZ felt acute pain. He was treacherously cut into his back. The guy twisted in pain, but gathering his last strength, pulled out a knife. URZ applied his strength against the tire, releasing lightning in a whole kilometer long. However, Trainer asked that guy to stop doing so, because there is no point in that. It is constantly moving, so it is thoughtless to strike randomly, not a way out. This will only in vain spend its magical power. URZ could not stand and shouted Shinob that it was dishonest. He even called her cunning. Trainer believed that it was not her merit in fact. She was just lucky all this time. The one who boldly began to make fun of the enemy directly into the face. The one who gave himself for the future battle. In fact, the battlefield is rarely perfect, and there are no strict rules that must be followed. No matter how dirty tricks a person does not use, the mouth of the dead forever remains closed, and only the survivor manages to remain right. Let us learn our Astigui always remember. Outside the Empire, it is a real warrior. The demon watched the guy and thought that he would soon be completely exhausted. It may have come to reach out to him. He was a fugitive, but he knew well. There is no point in running away, and he could not fight. He stood at the crossroads and could not decide what to do next. I sincerely sought to dispel this thick fog. Suddenly the ER notices that the Shinob ran out just before him. The girl thought that, of course, he was stronger than an ordinary person, but it seemed that he was not going to attack her. Yet it was not enough to light a fire in her heart. And then Shinob turned into the ERZ and said that it was enough. It was time to put this land. The girl took advantage of the magic of the earth, and then imposed a spell that lifted boulders and stones into the air. All these stones flew directly to the guy. He stood still without even moving. Bear confessed that he did not even think he would ever have to resort to this technique. And then he used a huge demonic spiral. It was a lot of surprise, and she was surprised to ask Shigrin where her fog went. The garbage looked around and noticed that not only her fog disappeared, but all the trees around. Shinoba barely got to her feet, holding on to the last strength. When silence finally fell around, there are only 2 bare trees next to the girl. The tire tensed sharply, feeling that the whole forest around it suddenly disappeared. He swept everything in his way, destroying the forest with obstacles. Urz came to the girl and finally said that he had found her. The Sinub realized that she needed to escape from Urza as soon as possible. The guy quickly realized what was happening and had time to grab the girl by the hand. When the tire turned to the boy, she saw his fist already flying straight to her side, and she realized that she would not have time to dodge. For a moment, when she saw a shimmering light, she became clear. Now the girl loses. Her heart crawled, as if about to jump out of her breasts. But she liked that feeling. Himb felt incredible heat. She literally burned. She smiled and thought, yes, this is exactly what she was missing. But suddenly Urz stopped his fist right at the girl's face. It was very surprised by the shinob, and she immediately asked what had happened. Urz answered her simply, "That's all. This is enough." Both were well aware that she had already lost, so the guy asked her not to bother him. But Shinob stopped the boy and seriously said that it was not a game at all. So do not allow him to treat her from above, humiliating her even more. The girl asked ERC whether she was really so worthless that she doesn't even deserve to get the last blow. It was angered by this guy, and he robbed at her so that she fell silent. He was unpleasant to beat such a beautiful face, so he asked to change it so that it would be easier to strike. Hearing these words, the tire seemed to be numb. She barely held her tears and grabbed her hands. When the earth began to move away, Trenarch asked the guy that he meant, saying that he had never beaten the girl, but in response the guy only sighed heavily. Shinob was shocked and remembered the guy's words from time to time that he could not hit her because of her beautiful face. Despite this, Trenarch strongly moved to her direction. In response, Eris said the demon that the Shinob was actually an even larger monster. She could not cope with her feelings. It seemed to be a fire, and she was sure about it to melt from this heat. Gears decided to take advantage of the Shinoba stopped in place and rushed to run to the gig. However, the girl immediately raged after him, trying to stop it and ask her to listen. The girl wondered his name, weight, and height. She asked the guy to tell something about himself. But Urz cut off Shinobus, ordered her to silence. He was not even going to listen to her. Urz asked the girl why she was following him, but in response she presented, "Her name is Shinobu." However, Urz asked a little annoyed if she was listening to him at all. Himb called her, reminding her that she was the eldest daughter of the runoff. From childhood, the girl was considered the most gifted ninja. In all the tournaments from the Go Batlu victory was always behind her. The girl with a crazy look confessed that she liked such guys that she liked the most, and she had already fallen in love with him. Hearing this, the guy was very surprised and asked what she was in mind. Trainer heard the whole conversation of the boys and confessed to Urza that he did not understand women at all. He asked if there was something that could make you fall in love so much. Urz in response confessed to the demon that even he, as an ordinary person, does not understand it. After she fell in love with him so much and sought to find Ka, even such a change of her attitude will not affect his opinion about her. But even at a distance, he feels her stubbornness. He just can't imagine what she will do if this guy is catching up. Shinoba tried to stop the Urz because she wanted to help him. The girl warned Urz that a little further on the way to him was waiting for her older brother. But he is already much stronger than this girl. His talent was noted by one of the 7 Kodzero heroes, so he is considered a true genius. That is why even Urza is not able to win it, so he would not try. Stood intense, thinking whether he would have to listen to the stories about geniuses and the legendary 7 of heroes again. But Ursk did not stop and went on, and the man told him that he would soon get out of the forest. Suddenly, the EMF saw as AAA arose just in front of him. The guy was very nervous, and the coach told him that everything happened exactly as he predicted. The guy noticed how the eldest brother of Shinob lies in the ashes. The coach only abandoned that they were guilty. Stupid. Some never find the strength to overcome the plow. Seeing her brother, Shinoba immediately called him by his name, but he did not even look back. Suddenly, the board flew through the ground and crashed directly into the tree. At this point, aka, he did not joke, but the OGR screamed in the whole voice that would never forgive people. Freinar explained that the angry OGR was not able to restrain himself. In simple words, he just lost his sense of rage. This ninja set fire to the house and stole the most valuable thing that he had. In his current state, he most likely did not even realize that he was faced with Erza. It was a lot of boyfriend, and he began to imagine as if AAA. It is a very polite and sensitive OGR, which above all dreams of friends with people. However, a completely different monster appeared before his eyes, aka. He lost self-control from rage. He began to shout in the whole voice. Urz was difficult to stay on his feet. It seemed that his legs were shaking from a loud river, and they were not listened at all. The guy trembled with the whole body, and before his eyes everything was blurred, as if in the fog. He was his friend Ka, but the guy did nothing wrong. However, the fear covered him so much that he could no longer withstand it. The guy realized that if he now confesses to him, then the next one will be. The demon confessed that he was completely absorbed by anxiety. The anger of the plowman, which was destroyed by the house, is quite clear. After all this is the guilty ninja. However, emotions often interfere with thinking reasonably. When a dangerous creature nearby, fear completely captures thoughts. At such moments, no one can remain calm and think cold. Trainer turned to this boy and confessed that his entire life had been concerned about injustice between people and demons. But now, having encountered an extremely strong anxiety, he felt true fear for the first time. The ogress named Aqua was terribly angry, aka. He could not understand what he blamed for these people. The only thing he wanted was a peaceful life. He looked at Shinob's brother and persistently asked him to return his house and garden immediately. At that moment, the man lifted his head and, having trembled, asked the grain what he meant. Talking about a peaceful life. What irony can be heard from the plowman, who himself is only dealing with destruction and murder. The guy reminded AKA that he attacked the defenseless people who lived peacefully. Therefore, it is impossible to believe in the words of Ogre under any circumstances. After all, he is a monster. It was incredibly difficult for me to listen to such words when they concerned me. Trainer said that it makes no sense, he no longer hears him. AKA, he did not joke and exploded with such a terrible cry that the frost went on the skin. He strongly moved towards his brother Shinob, and at the same time enrolled in a huge fist. The Shinbus in despair watched it, fearing for her brother. Trainer noticed that Ursus jumped sharply from his place and hurried forward. Jumping with all his strength, he repulsed the giant paw of Ogre, which stretched to the girl's brother. Everyone was stunned by the ERC did so with him. Urs returned to the guy and said he would never forgive what he had made him a friend. If it were not for his condition, he would have set him a squeezed. In response, the guy asked him not to call his eyes and get away. Shinobu lifted her brother from the ground, and together they moved to the forest. At this time, returned to the giant and said that people could actually be very cruel. Demons, giants, everyone is divided into categories, and now everyone is afraid of not only others but also themselves. They stood stubbornly on their own without even trying to understand the feelings of another, and Ka was not going to destroy anything. Ayres remembered that he was almost the same as that ninja. Then he was also scared, and he was very concerned about what others thought about him. Hinbi turned to him and asked the boy to stop these senseless pranks. After all, if the OGR has already come out of the way, it will be impossible to defeat it. However, it was angered by the boy and he shouted at the girl, ordered her to silence. The guy reproached them both. They say they do not even dare to speak, because they are guilty of everything. The guy turned to Ak and said he would not allow him to kill anyone. Therefore, he was ready to take on all his anger and pain, as a true friend. And at the same moment, AKA, he sharply sent his fist directly to him. Shinobu, along with his brother, watched the battle, not believing their own eyes. The guy suddenly turned to ERZ and asked why she called them Ogre, his friend. What does this weirdo say at all? Shinobu answered her brother that she did not know herself. In another situation, she would have already grabbed his hand and ran with him. But do they have the right to keep it right now? All this time, URZ was depressed by a stroke of an angry plow. He told the trainer that no matter how the words were picked up, one blow is enough, and it would end for him. He asked the demon that he was thinking about it all, or maybe he became even crazy than he before. Trainer replied that most likely the demon is just annoyed because they only circled in a circle, and if he never dares, everything will get worse. They say this is the reason, but it cannot attack KA. The trainer approaches the guy and reminds him, "It was you who promised Og that you will take all his anger and sadness." I was thoughtfully asked for himself if he knew what he could remove the plowman from the splitting of anger and sorrow. The countdown begins at this moment, and the hero of the name is Saul. Urs asked a demon in surprise what he was in mind. The demon talked about feelings. The coach calmly replied, "There will be no winners or defeated in this battle. He may no longer be able to stand on his feet, but if he does not turn away and escape, his feelings will eventually reach the opponent." Suddenly, Shinobu noticed that the ER had stopped suddenly and was just standing still. She asked the guy what he was doing here and why she didn't run away from the plow. When the terrible monster was already nearby, the girl asked the boy to be careful. However, Urs firmly stated that he was not going to flee from him, and it was at that moment that the OGR struck the boy with a powerful blow to his head. He squeezed in pain, his body pierced a wave of unpleasant sensations, and he confessed that he was now suffering more than ever. Nurture the belief that the strongest place in the human body is the forehead. And if you strengthen the body to the limit thanks to the breakthrough and stand the stroke with the whole body, you can even stand against the plow. Eros felt his forces almost exhausted, and was in surprise to catch himself that he had never felt such pain in his head before. But he knew, if he could withstand a little more, Eka would definitely return. The coach understood that it was like a walk in a thin crisis. All you have to do is shudder a little, and there will be no trace from the guy's head. Everything depended on mobility, visual acuity, and lightning reflexes. And yet, a strong spirit that will not shake about any fears. And here again it strikes the boy on his head. This time, Urs decided to apologize to Ogre on behalf of all people for having destroyed his house, which he built himself, and a garden for which he so carefully looked after. After all, everything was destroyed there too. He spent the night with the Hirza and then prepared dinner, but could not even thank him at least a piece of cake. The guy finally realized, there is no difference between people and cucumbers. They are all the same. It is at this moment that Akka causes another blow to Urs just on the head. The guy barely restrained and confessed that these creatures were very angry when something was destroyed and sometimes even starting crazy. But the difference was that ogres were much stronger than humans. It was even more angry with the plow. The Shinob watched all this and could not understand why the Reese did that way. He could just leave him. He would still calm down over time. So why is he risks his own life for it? The coach answered the boys that they would not understand it. After all, he knows better what happens when you cause someone's fears, especially if it concerns someone close. That is why the Ariris will reach out to the very end, and he will shout until he gets the heart. The coach smiled and laughed slightly, remembering how petty people considered him weak, although in fact he was the boldest among his students. When Urs took a blow from the plowman again, the trainer sighed and said that such stupid people were not even able to see this beauty that the ants on the skin. Here he is, a real hero. Despite all the dangers, this guy is ready to risk life for a friend. So, Akka sat on the ground and confessed that he was feeling terribly tired. He no longer has the strength on anything, and his legs are not obeyed. His house, furniture, and garden remained in the past. Now he had no place to return. Even reminiscent of it, tired of it. The OGR is almost fainted when the ERC has managed to reach it. The guy struck the plow on his head so that he would be faded. When the giant noticed the boy, he called him. Urs was convinced that everything was fine with him and immediately fainted. AKA was stunned when he saw this shabby man. The OGR confessed Erza that they were cruelly done, but did he really do it? In response, the guy smiled kindly and raised 2 fingers in front of him. Tears appeared in the eyes of the plowman, and he began to question the guy why he decided on such an act. After all, they met him only yesterday. Why is he generally ready to do it for the sake of the monster, who is considered all of him? And here the guy remembered how Ogre said that URZ was a wonderful person. He returned to Ogre and said he just told him exactly what he wanted to hear most. Ogres have incredible destructive force. However, Aka does not like to herself as they are now. For a while, AAA carefully put the guy on a soft floor. While ER was resting, recovering, he started cooking dinner. When the guy woke up, he asked the giant what happened to him. And then the guy remembered that he was faint. His head was pierced by severe pain after endless blows. Urs stood up slightly and noticed that his wounds were interrupted. However, the Vogor denied that he did not. The bandages were laid by a girl who was near the boy, AKA. He lowered his head and quietly confessed to the man that he could not believe those who destroyed his home. But she bowed her head to the ground. Shinob screamed to it, admitting that she was not interfering with her business. Still, she sincerely confessed to Akka that this man is extremely expensive to her. She so persistently asked him that he just failed to refuse. Meanwhile, URZ heard about Shinoba again and turned to Ogre, assuring that his intentions were quite serious. The guy asked the guy if he knew this girl. Urs replied that he sees her for the first time in her life. AKA added that, surprisingly, the girl is able to tie the wounds well. She even tied the plow. Urs realized that this was what happened to him while he slept. The OGR also remembered how the girl asked to give it to him. Eris peered into a notepad and noticed that he was a census notebook, but he never understood why he needed it. The heirs opened a notebook and saw that it was written on behalf of the Shinob. She recognized his name, but decided not to talk about it more. She wanted to hear these words from him. But the boy did not like it, and he asked in surprise what she was talking about. It was a poem. The noble girl wrote in him that she saw with her eyes how he fought with the Strajivsko. For the sake of rescuing a friend, he stood on the path of ninja from Japan, did not take a step back and defeated them. She has already met many soldiers to this day, but such as ERC has been very rare. But what is interesting, while being face to face with an angry Ohm, he stood with his head high, as if he had forgotten about fear. Suddenly, EMF remembered that at first he almost died of horror. The young man read further, realizing that even despite the danger, he did not think to leave him. It was then that the girl realized that even between the monster and the person, a real friendship can emerge. When the battle ended, she saw a tear rolled along the plowing cheek. At that moment, her heart squeezed from excitement. Now she constantly remembers how petty his soul was. Inside, it is a pity that she did, because she attacked his home, having only a reward. So most likely it's an apology letter, not a regular correspondence diary, aka. She returned to her and said that the leader of the gang once told her the same. Then she promised that they would restore both the house and the garden. They would do everything to correct guilt. That's how she said then. Urs wondered in the plow that he told them. AAA. He briefly replied that he just refused. After all, he no longer wanted to have any business with them. Then he ordered them to silently descend from the mountain. Ursa realized that she was felt. In the end, even if they apologized as much as they like, it could not heal the wound that he remained in his soul. It turned out that they could not solve this problem so simply. The heirs continue to listen carefully to the story of the shinobi, although it seems that he already guessed. Some miracle he managed to win her heart. To be honest, she is ready to marry him right now. But at the same time, she wants to know more about him. So the girl asked me to write everything about herself in this notebook. And then Urs turned the page and saw a whole list of questions there. The girl wondered, what dishes he likes? What girls do he really like? Would he agree to a kiss if the initiative goes from a girl? What dating or date scenario would you like to make for the first time? What breasts he likes? How many children would he want to have and what list they will bring them to? The ERZ was unable to disassemble the written, so he closed the notebook with irritation. AK was surprised that he had happened to him. But that man replied that there was nothing serious. The time passed and the guy finally sat down. Yes, the OGR already knew what was going to do next. AKA snatched his head and disappointed that he intended to leave this place. In the city at the foot of the mountain, everyone has already learned about him. And over time, someone will definitely come after him. It was a little upset by the guy, but he just said calmly that he understood everything. But suddenly Urs decided to ask the cucumber. If he does not mind, then he may not want to go with him. It surprised the plow, and he asked the guy what he meant. ER frankly admitted that he's seeking to see the world, gain experience, and become the one who would do something great. This is what was his goal at the moment. And if even AAA, it will go with him, then they are sure to be guaranteed. But Eka dared to ask the guy whether he was against him if he went with him. Eris immediately replied that of course he did not deny. This was very moving the plow, and tears appeared in his eyes. AKA. He turned to Urs and told him that he was a real good. A sincere smile appeared on the boy's face. Eurus asked the plow where he would like to go. Ogre, without holding back tears, quietly replied that he was leaving the Empire for the first time. He also told the boy that he wanted to thank him for his friendship and for his rescued. Subsequently, URZ and Aka decided to relax and go to bed. One morning, Urs turned to Trainar, asking if the morning had come. The demon replied that no, for a long time. The young man stretched in surprise, noting how long he slept. The guy asked Trainar where KA was, and it was at that moment that he put his hand on the sheet. He immediately took the paper and was stunned by what he saw. Urs noticed that this letter was sent to him from Ak. The guy asked the guy how his wounds felt and once again apologized to him. But EMF still didn't understand why he was asking again. The young man continued to read the letter and learned that the OGR would not be able to go with him. He was silent all this time, though he once served as a warrior in the army of the demons. In his childhood, he lived not in his native lands of ogres, but among the dark elves. But when the war began, his whole family was sent to the front. For the first time in his life, he met other Buns, except for his family. On the battlefield, the warrior army killed people in a variety of ways. They broke their heads, buried even alive, trampled their huge feet. But Akka was so frightened that everything he saw in front of him seemed to be a true horror. He could not answer those who sought revenge. AK confessed that his father and mother could not hold themselves and committed murder. He could not stop the army and save people from suffering. Aki could no longer tolerate this hell. After escaping from the army and the announcement by a traitor, the whole demonic country began to hunt behind him. That is why he was hiding on the ground all this time, and for more than 10 years he remained completely alone. The OGRD lightly thought that if he was able to make friends with a person, he would stop feeling this loneliness. But Eka never understood how people can forgive the bugs that ruthlessly destroyed them. That is why, when Urs was friends with him, he was extremely happy. The bird was incredibly important to the plow, so it could not take it with it. After all, he could not get into the hotel or the dining room, or even the city with the bird, aka. He confessed that the land is the only one he can call his friend in this world. That is why he does not want to cause him any hassle. But suddenly Urs grabbed his place and raced into the woods. Trainer shouted after him, asking where he was in a hurry. But Urs rushed to the demon and asked, "Did he really understand? He needs to catch up with Ak." But Trainar explained to the man that there was no point in running after, because the one he was chasing after dawn, so now you cannot catch up. The man became angry and asked Trainer why he did not tell him about it before. Trainer replied to the man who respects his choice. After all, he has no right to say something because he was the cause of the beginning of this war. This situation was quite upset the boy because no one told him that AKA will interfere with him. Trainer assured that he might never say anything like that. However, this giant will not withstand if it is a burden for him. His kindness, concern for Urs is constantly tearing it inside. But Urs did not stop. He repelled from the ground again and rushed to run on. The guy pulled on the rock and stopped for a moment, breathing deeply. Gathering all his strength, he shouted the name they were as loud as he could. The monster decided to take care of his friend, who is so far, but still with him under one sky. The OGR looked up to the sky and lifted 2 fingers with a smile. At that time, Princess Fiona's royal palace visited her father. She asked him to review her decision. After all, in the city, everyone is convinced that the ER is a criminal. They require him to be sentenced to life imprisonment or insist on death penalty for this guy. Fiona added that even in the royal palace, people stopped thinking prudently. Now they can say everything they want. Fiona could not understand why she did so with them. But in response to the request of his daughter, the soldier only sighed sadly and confessed that he could not correct everything. However, Fiona did not give up and tried to reach her father again. Soldier told the girl that she probably did not even imagine how devastating the army of the King of Demons was. Parents, brothers, sisters, and even spouses, all close people were taken away by this army. Demons brutally killed those who were near her. However, there were people in whom she took away everything. It is a family of Sadies. Among people are still fear and anger, as if this happened yesterday. Fiona strained, firmly clenching his fists. The girl with excitement assured that her King of Demons is not the one who is talking about, and he is not guilty of the death of these people. The Salt returned to Fiona and explained that even the slightest pain could have a big impact on people's actions. But they are not able to force everyone to change their mind about Urza. But people will demand a cruel punishment for him. Hearing this, Fiona with a fright in her eyes denied. No, it cannot be. Soda told the girl that the guy was of great importance to him, because he was the son of his close friends. That is why he allowed him to leave. But now he could not help him. That is why the soldier asked Fiona to forget about her better. Fiona didn't like it, and she was very upset. At that moment, Fu and his rival stood in the hallway and talked. Fu turned to the opponent and wondered what he remembered. How they, along with Urs, Princess, and even a rival once played the heroes. The rival asked the guy why he suddenly remembered it. Fu told the guy that once Urs always led them behind. Every day they gathered together on the street and gave each other a promise. When they grow up, they would become stronger than their parents. Fu smiled gently and promised that they would become stronger than their own parents. At first glance, it seems very brave. But then Fu noted that Ur seems to glow from the inside. Always support them with confident words and inspire not to give up. The Fu turned to the opponent and asked if he thought. This question made the opponent think about Fu's words. But the opponent replied to the boy that all that remained in the past. Although he believed that he would be able to become their leader, awareness of the difference in power has turned the whole world for him. Then the bears they so revered suddenly disappeared. The file smiled and laughed slightly, telling the guy that he had changed again. The guy plunged into memories and shared with his opponent that as a child they were extremely close. However, when their paths gradually diverged, they were less likely to find time for conversations and shared much less with each other. Over time, they began to communicate so rarely that he already knew nothing about Erza. At that moment, Fiona came out of the soldier's office. She looked very upset and intense. The food turned to the princess and wanted to say something looking at her face. But the girl interrupted him, assuring that yes, she did not change her decision to execute Urz. The girl trembled with fear and told the boys that even her father could not quench human anger. That's how he said. So who said it, even if Urza is found? However, Fiona again interrupted the boy and shouted to him that he had no right to do so. After all, the ERZ was their friend since childhood, and even if everyone stands against them, she is ready to protect this guy. Fu wanted to turn to the princess again, but at that moment he was interrupted by a security guard who loudly called Fiona. He apologized to the princess and reported that there was a man who strongly wanted to meet her. At that moment, the hero remembered the words of his son. It was always extremely difficult for him. Everyone constantly compared him with his father, and waited for him to repeat all the same as the hero did. He never paid attention to him and never supported in business. Because of this, the hero somehow said that it would probably be better if he was not born his son at all. The hero shuddered with fear, but suddenly one of the guards called him. The guards approached the pit almost close to the pit, through which Erida disappeared. One of them told the hero that the hole that his son dog jumped was already locked up, and so they could not find out where he headed. The guard shared another news with the hero. Several detachments comb the surrounding area in search of a guy. But now they do not have any kid. Therefore, the investigations seem to be frozen, and nothing can be done. The hero listened to the warrior and nodded, saying that everything was clear. However, he explained the guard that his magic would be enough for a short time, so he just could not leave the city. So he advised the soldiers not to stop on this pit, but to continue their search on the surface. But the hero suddenly doubted whether he was correctly understanding about magic reserves. Ursa's father recalled his son's last duel and thought, in those competitions he used such techniques that magic would have ended for an ordinary person. But he was able to cope with it, and even found the strength to escape. The hero decided that, given the reserve of his magic, the enemy could hardly go far. And then Kuro confessed that, of course, he had already given it. After all, he had no idea that his son could be so strong. The man thought that there were no shadows in the body movements. They were like a mockery of the enemy. The hero understood perfectly. Yes, he already learned it. But suddenly the hero remembered that he had never praised his son for the accomplishments he had achieved on his own. The man realized that he made a mistake and quietly swore. Here's a mess. Now the conscience did not give him rest, and he did not understand why he did not listen to him. Why did he not ask his son before he was concerned about and what he seeks in life? If only he knew that his son was feeling, he might not have lost him now. At this point, the guard again turned to the hero. He reported that an urgent message from the detachment from the capital was received. The hero, without spending time, ordered what had happened. The man addressed the warrior and asked if they really found Urza, but the guard shook his head and replied that it was not true. The warrior told the hero that Princess Fiona, Jean Rival, and Midai Fu disappeared from the city. It was very scared of Lord Hero, and he was anxious about the warrior what he was in mind. At the same time, all the children of the heroes and those who were truly close to her gathered in the forest. She saw her mother who came and surprised others that the guests were much more than she expected. Mom noticed Princess Fiona among the crowd. She approached her and said that she was the heir to the imperial throne. She warned her mother, Fiona should not come here, because it could be bad for her. But Fiona was quite confident in her choice, so she immediately answered. She firmly believed. Her strength exceeds even the power of the Imperial Knights, so she wanted to meet the ER as it really was. She could no longer sit quietly in the walls of the Imperial Palace and wait for someone to find it instead. My mother still decided to talk to Fiona again, trying to convince her to give up this plan and go back. Fu told the boy's mother, who did not know how EMF himself treats this situation, but he was always a dear childhood friend for them. Fu turned to his opponent and asked what the feeling it was. Rival agreed with him. With a smile on her face, the garden told the boys that they really thought about the same thing. They sincerely seek that the earth returns to them and dream of meeting it again. They all sincerely seek to understand his anxiety and goals, and all this for the sake of not making a mistake this time. Sidi listened carefully to her mother and agreed with her. And then my mole got courage and confidently asked the guys if they were ready to go on the road. After all, outside the imperial capital, they are waiting for a new way, and it can no longer make them a promise that everyone will be safe. Mom told the boys that it was time to go on. All the boys supported her, nodding and saying, "Yes, everything is right." At that moment, Urz realized that the answer from the plows did not wait, so he got off the big stone. The guy moved into the woods, thinking about everything that happened. We trained the feelings of So, and he told the boy that he was already going on the road. However, the demon did not even wait for his answer. Prangar decided to somehow support the guy in his disappointment, so he told Arrow a story about how the hero and his friends once dreamed of a world in which people and demons would live on an equal footing. The version asked Trainer what he said about his father. Trainer confirmed that he said something, and added, "Wars were not changed. The main thing is the peace between all creatures, and in general it is all about peace. However, it was simply impossible to avoid the difference in views and culture. And even because of such little things, controversy broke out between people. In the end, the wars between different species are not easy, and the clashes between them happen even more often than you can imagine." At first, he was answered that everything he did not make any sense, but Trainer did not admit it and said that it was not true. His actions were really saved by Ogre, and having fulfilled his only desire, he became a true friend and reliable support for him. The ears told the demon that he had not changed anything on a global scale. The coach denied, they say, now he was different. Trainer turned to the guy and reminded him not to forget what he did with Ogrum. He asked to think about it and become stronger. It is not necessary to stop there. Trainer asked the boy to travel the world and, based on his actions, they may be able to find a hint. A hint that the hero could not find was next to him all this time. Trainer told the boy that he may now move to his goal in small steps, but experience and sincere admiration never deceive. And right now the world is on the threshold of major changes, ready to turn upside down. And now for Erza, the real path begins.